My name's Alex, I'm 31, and up until that Thanksgiving dinner, I genuinely believed that quiet endurance was the secret to a lasting marriage. That maybe if I just kept showing up, kept doing the dishes, kept driving her mother to appointments when no one else could be bothered, kept remembering birthdays and anniversaries they forgot themselves, I'd eventually earn a seat at the table. A real one. Not just the physical seat, but the kind that came with being respected, loved, valued. I know how naive that sounds now, but when you grow up being the peacemaker in a loud, fractured household, you learn to read the room before you ever think to speak. You learn to laugh when others laugh, even when it's at your expense. And worst of all, you convince yourself that being tolerated is the same thing as being wanted. Thanksgiving had always been her family's thing. Her father was the kind of man who ran board meetings like Sunday sermons and expected applause with his punchlines. Her mother was syrupy sweet when guests were over and colder than frozen countertops when they weren't. And my wife, Leah, she had this way of morphing into whoever the room needed her to be. Around me, she was sharp and pragmatic. Around them, she was the glittering, witty socialite they adored. I was the background extra in our marriage, a man-shaped lamp in the corner of the living room. And for the longest time, I was okay with that. Or I told myself I was. We pulled up to her parents' house just after noon. The driveway was already full cousins and uncles and people I barely remembered from our wedding 2 years ago. I was carrying the pumpkin pie I made from scratch because her mother didn't trust store-bought. And Leah was already texting from the passenger seat, thumbs tapping like she was orchestrating a Broadway show. "Can you grab the bottle too?" she asked without looking up. I nodded, balanced the bottle in the crook of my arm, and followed her up the steps like luggage. Inside, it was all hugs and air kisses, someone's toddler crying over spilled juice, and that smell of overseasoned stuffing mixed with perfume and ambition. Her father clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Alex, you still doing that computer thing?" It was a joke. It was always a joke. I run IT infrastructure for 3 hospitals, but to him, if it didn't involve stocks or mergers, it didn't matter. I smiled and nodded like I always did. Dinner was served around 4. The table was long enough to fit a dozen people, and I was wedged between her cousin Evan, who once asked if I ever planned on bulking up or was skinny your whole personality, and her Aunt Margot, who treated every meal like a job interview. Leah was across from me, laughing too loud at things that weren't funny, her eyes darting to her mother for approval like a schoolgirl hoping her art project made the fridge. The food was fine. Better than fine, actually. Her mom could cook, I'll give her that. And for a brief moment, I let myself believe it was just another holiday. Just another few hours of playing my part before we went home and pretended we were normal. But then the conversation turned to marriage. Her uncle was talking about his son's engagement, and someone made a comment about how you really have to be sure before settling down. Leah took a long sip of her drink, then another, and then she said it. Honestly, she was smiling. Marrying Alex was like settling for instant mashed potatoes, bland, cheap, and only useful when there's nothing better around. The room exploded with laughter. Not a polite chuckle. A full-on, breathless wave of it. Her mother covered her mouth like she was scandalized, but her eyes were gleaming. Her father slapped the table. Even the toddler, not understanding a word, joined in because everyone else was doing it. I didn't laugh. I didn't speak. I just sat there with my hands in my lap, my throat closing up like I'd swallowed something sharp. Leah looked at me, just for a second, and then rolled her eyes. "Oh, relax," she said. "It's a joke." Her cousin Evan leaned over and whispered, "Is he always this quiet?" I stood up. Quietly. I didn't make a scene. Didn't shout. Didn't ask her why. I just started clearing the plates, one by one. My hands were shaking, but I kept moving. I brought them into the kitchen, rinsed them, stacked them, dried them. Behind me, I could hear the conversation go back to sports. Pie was passed around. Leah didn't even look up. I washed every dish, and then I drove us home in silence. She tried to joke about it in the car. "You're really going to be mad about a mashed potatoes joke?" she said, scrolling through her phone. "God, you're so sensitive." I didn't respond. And for the first time in our relationship, I think that silence scared her. The next morning, I packed a bag and moved into my condo downtown. I didn't leave a note. Didn't take anything more than the essentials. When she got home, she texted, "Where are you?" I didn't answer. A few hours later, she called. I let it ring. She left a voicemail saying I was overreacting, that it was just a joke, that I was embarrassing her by making this a thing. I deleted it without listening to the end. Over the next few days, her messages went from annoyed to confused to frantic. Her mother texted too, first scolding me for abandoning Leah during the holidays, then begging me to just hear her out. I didn't reply. And then 2 weeks later, she showed up. It was late, maybe 10 p.m. I was on the couch, reading. I heard the buzzer go off and checked the camera. She was outside the building, crying, mascara streaked down her face, hair in a mess, slamming her fist against the intercom. "Alex, please, please just talk to me." She was on her knees. I let it ring. And then my phone lit up. It was a message from her mother. "Please, just let her explain." I stared at it for a long moment, then typed my reply. "Tell her instant potatoes don't reheat well." And I hit send. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was sad. Not really. It was more like my brain refused to turn the volume down. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the echo of her voice still trapped in the corners of my apartment, bouncing off the silence like a drunk moth in a light fixture. "Please, just talk to me," she'd said, over and over again. And yet, the sound that haunted me more wasn't her sobbing, it was the laughter. That high-pitched, careless, synchronized chorus of people I'd served, cleaned up after, driven around, and smiled politely for. People who'd never once made space for me. People I thought I had to win over by being useful, harmless, easy to ignore. A few days after the intercom incident, I changed the code on the building. Not that she had it, but just in case. Then I called my lawyer. Not to file for anything. Not yet. I just wanted to know what my options were. I was calm about it. Calm in a way that almost frightened me. Because in the stillness of my condo, I had started to realize something Leah never expected. I wasn't mourning her. I was mourning the version of myself I had allowed to exist in that marriage. I stopped responding to her texts. No long speeches. No dramatic exits. Just silence. She tried new tactics, flowers delivered to my office, voicemails and a cracking voice about how she missed us. Her mother sent another message. "You're hurting her. Please don't throw away a marriage over one bad joke." I didn't reply, but I screenshotted the message. I was building a folder. A quiet little insurance policy, just in case this turned uglier. And something told me it would. Then came the letter. Mailed to my condo, handwritten. Her penmanship was perfect, of course. She'd always taken pride in her handwriting, called it elegant. The letter was 5 pages long, written in the kind of apologetic tone you use when you're desperate but still trying to sound composed. She admitted the joke was ill-advised, but insisted I'd embarrassed her by walking out like a child. She said she was sorry that her family didn't always know how to show their love, and that I had misinterpreted their humor. She wrote that she needed me to stop punishing her and come home, so we could move past this. I read it twice. Then I lit a match and dropped it in the kitchen sink. By the 3rd week, Leah went from begging to bargaining. "I've told them all to apologize," she said in a voice memo. "Even my dad. That's a big deal, you know that." I didn't know that. Her father had once refused to apologize to a waiter he made cry at a steakhouse because it builds character. But I wasn't interested in their sudden remorse. Not when it came after silence, after mockery, after peeling laughter that peeled a layer off my spine. I took some time off work. Just a few days. I needed clarity. I drove out to a quiet little cabin I used to visit before I met Leah, back when I knew how to be alone without feeling lonely. I brought a notebook. No Wi-Fi. No phone calls. Just me, some coffee, and the sound of trees not judging me. And that's where I remembered the venue. See, what Leah and her family never knew, because they never asked, is that I have partial ownership in a lakeside property her cousin had recently booked for his wedding. It was a side investment I made with a friend from college. He managed the business. I just handled the back-end tech and got a cut. It was never relevant before. But now, it was a live wire in my brain. Leah's cousin, the same one who whispered, "Is he always this quiet?" had secured the place 6 months ago. Deposit paid. Balance pending. The wedding was set for late spring. I texted my friend from the cabin. "Hey, I need to pull something from the schedule. We can refund the deposit." He called within minutes. "Which event?" I gave him the date. The name. "You sure?" "Absolutely," I said. "Family conflict. Irreconcilable." I didn't smile until I hung up. That night, I took a long walk under the stars, letting the cold sting my cheeks until I could feel something deeper than rage. I wasn't doing this out of spite. Not entirely. I just needed her family to understand that the man they laughed at knew how to sit quietly and pull strings they never even noticed. By the time I returned home, Leah had dropped off a bag at my door, photos of us, a pair of my socks she'd found behind the dresser, and a note that said, "Let's start over." I picked it up, tossed the socks in the laundry, and left everything else on the hallway floor. Then the final straw came. An email from her father. A cold, clipped message that read, "Alex, this has gone on long enough. I don't know what kind of attention you're hoping to get, but real men don't abandon their wives over a joke. Leah deserves better, and frankly, she should have married someone with a backbone. You're embarrassing yourself." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I wrote a short reply. "Thank you for confirming everything I needed to know. I'll make sure Leah gets what she deserves." And I hit send. I hadn't decided yet what she deserves looked like exactly, but I knew it wouldn't be a second chance. Not this time. Not when I'd finally found the strength to live without their approval. I didn't hear back after that email. Not right away. For a few blissful days, it was silent. No buzzing intercom. No text begging for closure. No more letters trying to reframe what happened as some trivial misunderstanding. Just me, waking up in a bed that didn't smell like regret, sipping coffee without checking my phone, living in the kind of quiet that used to feel lonely, but now felt like peace. Then came the fallout. The first inkling of it was a phone call I let go to voicemail. It was from Leah's cousin, the one who'd asked if I was always this quiet, now sounding anything but. His voice was tight, strained. No more smugness. "Hey man, I don't know what's going on, but we just got a call that the venue's been canceled. My mom's freaking out. We already sent out the invitations. This has to be a mistake, right? I mean, you wouldn't, this isn't because of, look, just call me back, okay?" I didn't call back. A day later, Leah messaged me. Not the usual soft-voiced plea or apology. No, this one had claws. "You really canceled their wedding? You're unbelievable. That's not just petty, it's vindictive. Do you even realize how many people this affects?" I stared at the message for a minute, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed, "Tell your cousin I'm sorry. Sometimes people settle for what's available until something better comes along." Sound familiar? She didn't respond. 3 hours later, I got another email, this one from her mother. It started formal, like I was some errand employee being scolded at a PTA meeting. Then it turned emotional. She tried a new tactic, guilt. "We welcomed you into our family. We accepted your quirks. We let you marry our daughter. And this is how you repay us? By sabotaging a wedding over a comment that was clearly a joke? Grow up, Alex. Be a man." There it was again. Be a man. The phrase they threw around like a leash, meant to yank me back into silence. But it wasn't working anymore. I didn't reply to her either. Instead, I forwarded the email to my lawyer and said, "Document this." Because by now, I wasn't just protecting myself emotionally, I was preparing for the next act. I knew Leah, knew her family. They didn't just walk away. They circled. They retaliated. And deep down, I think I wanted them to. Because the more they pushed, the more they revealed who they really were. The cousin's fiancé called next. I hadn't even saved her number, but I recognized the area code and let it go to voicemail. Her message was frantic, borderline sobbing. "Alex, please. I don't even like Leah that much, okay?" I didn't laugh at the joke. I tried to say something, but her mom gave me a look and, ugh, never mind. Just, "We already paid for the flowers and the catering. Can't you be the bigger person here? You're ruining my wedding over something I didn't even do." That one almost got to me. Almost. Because she wasn't the villain in all this. But she was complicit. And more importantly, if the roles were reversed, none of them would have stuck their neck out for me. Not one. So I let the message sit. Then I deleted it. A week later, Leah showed up in person. I was coming back from the grocery store, arms full of bags, earbuds in, zoning out to an old podcast, when I saw her standing by the building's entrance. No makeup. Hair down. Coat hanging loosely off her shoulders like she'd thrown it on last minute. She looked tired, like she hadn't been sleeping. I had to admit, a part of me flinched at how familiar she still looked. But I didn't stop walking. "Alex, please, can we talk? Just 5 minutes." I didn't respond. Just moved toward the elevator and tapped the button with my elbow. She followed me. "You don't have to forgive me," she said, her voice catching. I need to explain. That joke wasn't even supposed to come out like that. I'd had a few drinks and, God, I was just trying to be funny. I didn't mean it." The elevator doors opened. I stepped in. She didn't follow. She just stood there, lip trembling, staring like she was waiting for a cue that never came. "I miss you," she whispered. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since that night, and said, calmly, "No, you miss the version of me that let things like that slide. Then I pressed the button and watched the doors close. That night, I blocked her number. The cousin's wedding was eventually moved to a small community center 2 towns over. They made it sound intentional, more rustic, more intimate, but I heard through mutual contacts that half the guests didn't show. Apparently, the cousin's fiancé broke down crying during the vows. The photos looked stiff, forced. No fairy tale ending. As for me, I started going to therapy, not because of the joke, but because of how long I'd let myself believe I deserved it. I started lifting again, running in the mornings. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen since the wedding. People who, it turned out, had noticed how Leah talked to me. They just assumed I was okay with it. I wasn't. Not anymore. And maybe the most satisfying part of all was that I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to burn bridges. I just stepped away, quietly, completely, and watched them realize how cold it was without the man they all thought they could laugh at forever. But that wasn't quite the end. Because a month later, something arrived in the mail. A thick envelope. No return address. Inside? Divorce papers. Signed. When I saw the envelope, I just stood there in the entryway, keys still dangling from the lock, grocery bag on the floor by my feet. It was thick, too thick to be casual, and the lack of a return address told me everything I needed to know. She wanted this to be clean, silent, final. After all the crying, the texts, the desperate intercom pleading, she folded first. I didn't feel triumphant. Not right away. I carried the envelope to the table like it might bite me. Sat down. Opened it. Inside were the papers. Clean. Crisp. Cold. Her signature was there in the last box, neatly written, still carrying that polished look she took so much pride in. There was a short typed note from her lawyer, boilerplate stuff, amicable dissolution, no fault filing, property and financials to be negotiated separately. No personal note. Not even a post-it. Just that one word typed at the top of the cover page, divorce. I stared at it for a while. My name next to hers. The beginning of our lives, stitched together by vows and rings and forced smiles, now unraveling with a few strokes of a pen. And then I exhaled. A long, deep, soul-emptying breath I didn't realize I'd been holding since Thanksgiving night. And right there, in the quiet of my kitchen, I felt it hit me, not sadness, not bitterness, but relief. Pure, undiluted relief. Not because it was over, but because I didn't have to end it. She did the one thing I never expected her to do, take responsibility. She didn't fight it, didn't drag it out. She'd said it all, begged enough, spun the wheel of shame and guilt, and now that it didn't work, she was walking away. Clean. Like nothing happened. I signed the papers. No hesitation. No ceremony. I packed them back into a new envelope, printed the postage, and mailed them back the next morning. I didn't tell anyone. Not my coworkers. Not my few mutual friends. It wasn't a headline in my life. It was just a punctuation mark. A long overdue period at the end of a sentence I should have stopped writing 2 years ago. That was the end of Leah, but not the end of the fallout. Because word got out. Her cousin, the cousin, posted some cryptic story on Instagram. Some people think silence is strength. It's really just cowardice with better branding. That made me laugh. Genuinely laugh. He followed it up with a photo of his wife at a do-over dinner party, where she sat stone-faced behind a rustic-themed cake that read, "Here's to new beginnings." The whole thing looked like a Pinterest board gave up halfway through. And yet, I felt nothing. No anger. No pettiness. Just secondhand embarrassment for how desperately they still tried to perform their version of perfection for an audience that had stopped clapping. Leah didn't post anything. Not right away. Then, one night about a month later, she uploaded a photo of her alone on a beach, staring out at the water. The caption? Sometimes, the storm you're running from is inside you. The comments were full of, "You got this, babe, and proud of you for healing." I didn't comment. I didn't even smile. Because I knew the truth. The real storm wasn't inside her. It was me, finally waking up. A few weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring, as always. Then curiosity won, and I checked the voicemail. It was her mother. Her voice was clipped. Almost tired. "Alex, I know you don't want to hear from me, and I won't call again. I want you to know we got your message. Loud and clear. You were never just anything. Not to us. Maybe we didn't say it enough, or at all, but you mattered. We just didn't know how to show it. I hope you're okay. I hope you find someone who makes you feel like more than the background. And I hope Leah learns from this. I really do." That one caught me off guard. Not because I forgave her. I didn't. I wouldn't. But because hearing those words, "you mattered," from someone who once treated me like cheap wallpaper, felt like picking a lock you forgot you were trapped behind. I didn't call back. Didn't need to. Closure doesn't come in tearful apologies or voicemail confessions. It comes when you no longer need them. A year passed. I finished therapy. Not because I had some big aha moment, but because I'd gotten what I needed, a mirror held up to all the parts of me that whispered, "Stay. Endure. Swallow your pain and smile." I stopped feeding that voice. I rebuilt. Quietly. I redesigned my condo. New colors. New furniture. Nothing that reminded me of her. I donated every wedding gift, every monogram towel, every photo where I smiled like I wasn't slowly disappearing. I started dating again. Slowly. Cautiously. And then, a strange thing happened. One night, I met someone. Her name was Sarah. She worked in community outreach, taught kids coding on the weekends, and never once made me feel like I had to prove my worth to sit beside her. We had coffee, then lunch. Then she asked to see the cabin I used to retreat to, and I said yes. She didn't laugh at my quiet. She leaned into it. And when I told her the mashed potatoes story, half as a joke, half as a test, she didn't recoil or try to defend Leah. She just blinked, took a bite of her sandwich, and said, "You deserve full-course respect, not instant anything." I didn't cry, but I wanted to. Not because I still hurt, but because I finally didn't. I got the final divorce confirmation a few weeks later. It was a plain white envelope. No drama. No sting. I filed it away. Then I poured myself a drink, sat on my balcony with the city twinkling below, and realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Leah. Not at her family. Not even at myself. I was free. Not just legally. Truly. And freedom, I learned, isn't walking away. It's knowing you never have to walk back. I'm Alex, 28, and for the first time in my life I thought I had finally made it. After years of saving, working overtime, and eating way too many instant noodles, I had just bought my first house. It wasn't a mansion or anything, just a 3-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood. But to me, it felt like a castle. I had worked for every dollar of that down payment, built my credit from scratch, and negotiated the mortgage myself. It was mine. The first weekend after I got the keys, I invited my parents and my younger brother, Tyler, 25, over for dinner. I'd been excited all week, imagining their reactions as they saw the place for the first time. I thought this was going to be a proud moment for all of us, a kind of look, we did it moment. The night started fine. Mom complimented the kitchen. Dad asked about the mortgage rate. Tyler made a joke about how far I was from downtown. But there was this edge in the air I couldn't quite place. You know that weird tension when everyone's smiling, but it feels a little too forced? That was the vibe. We sat down to eat, and that's when Tyler smirked, leaned back in his chair, and said it. "You only bought this house because Mom and Dad helped you. So let me move in. You've got the space." I froze for a second, fork halfway to my mouth. "Oh, what?" Mom nodded like Tyler had just made the most reasonable request in the world. "He's right, Alex. You should help family. Tyler's been having a rough time with rent. It's the least you can do." Dad, of course, piled on. "Exactly. Your mother and I raised you. We supported you through college. And now that you're settled, it's time to give back. Let your brother stay here rent-free until he gets back on his feet. It's the least you can do." I laughed, at first thinking it was some weird joke. Tyler moving in? Rent-free? In my house that I just bought? I waited for one of them to crack a smile, but no one did. They were all looking at me like I was supposed to just say sure, no problem, and hand over the keys to my spare room. "Hold on," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. "I didn't ask for your help with this house. I paid for it myself. Why would Tyler just move in? He's got a job." Tyler rolled his eyes. "Yeah, but my rent just went up. And you've got 3 bedrooms. You don't even need all that space." Mom sighed dramatically, like I was being selfish. "Alex, stop making this difficult. Family helps family." Something about the way she said it made my stomach twist. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an expectation. I took a slow breath, put my fork down, and said carefully, "If that's how you all feel, maybe you shouldn't expect me to keep helping you anymore." The table went quiet. Even Tyler stopped smirking. For a moment, the only sound was the clinking of Dad's fork against his plate. I could feel the heat rising in my face, but I didn't look away. Then, slowly, I reached into my pocket and pulled something out that made all 3 of them freeze in place. I didn't plan on dropping that line. "Don't expect me to keep helping you anymore." but it came out of me like a spark hitting dry wood. The silence that followed was thick, like everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Mom's fork hovered in midair, Tyler's smirk finally cracked into a frown, and Dad just looked at me like I had kicked his favorite dog. "What's that supposed to mean?" Dad finally said, his tone sharp enough to slice through the quiet. "It means," I said, leaning back in my chair, "that I've been doing a lot for this family lately. Helping out financially, helping Tyler with his car last month, helping you guys with that vacation fund when the water heater blew. And now suddenly, apparently, I'm supposed to hand over free housing because I'm the responsible one who bought a house." Tyler snorted. "Oh, come on. You act like you're some saint just because you chipped in a couple times. You're single, Alex. No kids. You've got way more disposable income than I do. I'm just asking for a room, not a kidney." I couldn't help it. I laughed. "Right, because having a job and paying my own bills is a rare medical condition I should be punished for." Mom shot me a look. "Alex, that's not fair. Your brother is trying. He's been under so much stress." "Really?" I cut in, maybe a little sharper than I intended. "Because last week he posted an Instagram story from Miami with a caption that said, and I quote, 'Living my best life.' Is that the stress we're talking about?" Tyler rolled his eyes. "Wow, stalking my socials now? Creepy much. I follow you." "It's not stalking if you literally broadcast it to your 300 followers," I said, shrugging. "Also, I'm pretty sure that poolside margarita cost more than my water bill for the entire month." Dad pushed his plate away, clearly getting annoyed. "Enough, both of you. This bickering is childish. The point is, your mother and I are asking you to step up for your family. We helped you get where you are. It's time to return the favor." That line hit me right in the chest because it wasn't true. They hadn't helped me get where I was, not financially, anyway. If anything, I had been slipping them extra cash for years. But I bit my tongue. This was not the hill to die on tonight. I stood up, collecting plates like the good host I was still trying to be. "You know what? Let's table this conversation for later. Dinner's getting cold." But it didn't stop there. Over the next few days, things got worse. First came the texts from Mom. Little passive-aggressive reminders about how much family means and how proud your grandparents would be if you helped your brother through this tough time. She even sent me a picture of Tyler as a toddler, wearing a dinosaur onesie, with the caption, "Remember when you used to protect him?" I almost replied with, "Yeah," and then he learned how to talk, but I restrained myself. Then came Dad's calls. Short, clipped, and always ending with some variation of, "It's your duty, Alex. We didn't raise you to be selfish." The real kicker came on Friday. I got home from work, opened my fridge, and found 2 grocery bags with Tyler's name written on them in Sharpie. He'd apparently let himself in while I was at work, which meant one of my parents had given him the spare key I'd left at their house for emergencies. I called Mom immediately. "Hey, quick question," I said, keeping my tone light. "Did someone break into my house and drop off groceries? Or did you give Tyler my spare key?" "Oh, that," Mom said, sounding completely unbothered. "Yes, I gave it to him. He needed to drop off a few things since he'll be moving in soon." It just made sense. I nearly dropped my phone. "Moving in soon? We haven't even agreed on anything." "Alex," she said, like she was talking to a stubborn child, "stop being dramatic. You have 2 empty bedrooms. You won't even notice he's there." I let out a sharp laugh. "Oh yeah? Is he bringing a cloaking device?" Because I feel like I'd notice a fully grown man living in my house rent-free. She sighed. "Why are you making this difficult? He's your brother. He needs support. This is what family does." I gripped the phone tighter. You know what else family does? They ask before handing out keys to someone else's house. That night, I changed the locks. Saturday morning, Tyler showed up at my door with a duffel bag in one hand and a look of pure shock on his face when his key didn't work. "What's wrong with you, Alex?" he said as soon as I opened the door. "Surprise," I said deadpan. "Welcome to the new lock experience. It's very exclusive." He shoved past me into the hallway, dropping his bag. "You seriously changed the locks? You're unbelievable." "Thanks," I said. "I try." He glared at me. "You're being ridiculous. Mom and Dad said I could move in." "Cool story," I said, crossing my arms. "But last I checked, Mom and Dad don't own this house." "I do, and I didn't agree to this." He muttered something under his breath about me being selfish and stormed out, slamming the door so hard one of my picture frames rattled. 2 hours later, Mom called. "What did you do?" "Tyler said you locked him out." Yep, I said cheerfully. Because he doesn't live here. Alex, you're driving a wedge in this family. Is this really what you want? No, I said, my voice finally hardening. What I want is some basic respect for my boundaries. If that's too much to ask, maybe the wedge was already there. By Sunday night, the group chat was a war zone. Mom sending guilt trip quotes about siblings being lifelong best friends, Dad posting lectures about gratitude, and Tyler dropping passive-aggressive memes about greedy landlords. I stayed quiet, but inside, a little voice was whispering that maybe it was time to stop playing nice. Because if they thought I was selfish before, they were about to see just how selfish I could get. The group chat stayed quiet for a few days after I ignored their guilt trip. I honestly thought maybe things were cooling down, that they had realized I wasn't budging. I threw myself into work, invited a couple of friends over to christen the grill on my back deck, and for the first time since buying the house, I started to feel like it was really my place. Then, Friday rolled around. I was coming home from a long day, ready to binge some Netflix and enjoy a rare quiet evening. But when I pulled into the driveway, my stomach dropped. Tyler's beat-up Honda Civic was parked in front of my garage. At first, I thought maybe he'd just come by to talk, but when I stepped inside, my worst fear was confirmed. There were boxes in my living room. Not just one or two, an entire stack of them, labeled in Tyler's messy handwriting. Clothes, gaming console, kitchen stuff. And there, sitting on my couch with a controller in his hand, was Tyler, playing my PlayStation. "Hey man," he said, like this was totally normal. "Hope you don't mind. Mom said it was fine for me to go ahead and start moving my stuff and since you've been so busy." I blinked. "Excuse me." He barely looked up from the screen. "She said you'd come around eventually, so I figured why wait? Might as well get settled now." I laughed, but it wasn't a funny laugh. It was that hollow, I can't believe this is happening kind of laugh. "Tyler, how exactly did you get in here?" "Because I changed the locks." "Oh, yeah," he said, finally pausing the game. "Dad had a locksmith friend come by earlier this week and make a copy for me. You really shouldn't make things so difficult, you know." I just stood there, my blood pressure spiking so fast I could hear it in my ears. "You had someone rekey my house without my permission?" He shrugged, completely unfazed. "Relax, man. We just needed a spare key anyway, right? This is your family we're talking about. Stop acting like such a control freak." A control freak. For being upset that my house had been essentially invaded. I stormed into the kitchen, half expecting to see my food untouched. And of course, half of my leftovers from the night before were gone. There were also 2 six-packs of beer in my fridge that I hadn't bought. "Tyler," I said slowly, gripping the counter so I wouldn't lose it. "You don't live here. This isn't your place. You can't just move in because Mom said so. You need to get your stuff and leave." He smirked, leaning back against the couch. "Good luck with that. Mom and Dad are coming over tonight anyway. We'll all talk it out like adults." And just like that, he unpaused the game. I spent the next hour pacing my own kitchen like a stranger. By the time Mom and Dad arrived, I was ready for war, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. Mom walked in like she owned the place. "Alex," she said in that calm, condescending tone only Mom seemed to master. "We need to put an end to this tension. Tyler is under a lot of stress, and you have more space than you need. This arrangement makes sense." "An arrangement," I repeated flatly. "You mean the one where my brother moves into my house against my will?" Dad stepped forward, his face set in a way I'd only seen a handful of times growing up. "This isn't just about you anymore, Alex. We've already told Tyler he can stay here as long as he needs." My mouth fell open. "You what?" "You heard me," Dad said firmly. "Your family. It's time you started acting like it." I laughed, a short, bitter laugh. "Acting like it? You just had someone break into my house and make a copy of my key. That's not family, that's trespassing." Mom shook her head, her voice full of that disappointed tone that used to make me feel guilty as a kid. "I can't believe how selfish you're being. Tyler is your brother. He's going through a rough patch, and all you can think about is yourself." "Rough patch?" I said, incredulous. "He just went to Miami. He has a job. The only rough patch he's in is the one where he doesn't want to pay rent anymore." That's when Tyler decided to throw gasoline on the fire. "Maybe if you weren't such a control freak, you'd actually have a girlfriend by now instead of sitting in this empty house alone. No wonder you bought such a big place. Overcompensating much." For a moment, the room went dead silent. I stared at him, and I could feel that laugh bubbling up again. Except this time, There was no humor in it. "You know what, Tyler?" I said finally, my voice low. "You can make all the jokes you want about my life, but at least I'm not the one who needs mommy and daddy to beg my older brother for free rent." Tyler's smirk faltered for just a second, but Mom was quick to swoop in. "Enough," she said sharply. "We are not going to let you throw your brother out on the street. If you won't do this willingly, we'll figure something else out." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, my chest tight. Dad crossed his arms. "It means we might have to take a more formal approach. Your name might be on the deed, but we can still talk to a lawyer about what's fair. After all, family contributions count for something." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Were they seriously threatening legal action over my house? Over something they hadn't even paid for? At that moment, something inside me snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just picked up my phone, opened my banking app, and scrolled to the history of every transfer I'd made to them over the past 3 years. Mortgage help when their roof needed fixing. Extra cash when Tyler lost his job last summer. Plane tickets for them to visit Mom's sister last Christmas. I turned the screen around and held it up. "See all this? This is what I've done for this family. Tens of thousands of dollars. Every single time you asked, I came through. And now you're threatening me because I won't let Tyler squat here." No one spoke. Mom's mouth opened, then closed again. Dad's face went red. Tyler suddenly found the floor very interesting. For the first time that night, I felt completely calm. "You all made a choice tonight," I said, my voice steady. "And I heard you loud and clear." I walked over to the drawer where I kept the spare key they'd had, took it out, and without breaking eye contact, dropped it into the trash. "You've got until tomorrow to get these boxes out of my house," I said to Tyler. "After that, anything left here goes to Goodwill." And before any of them could respond, I walked out the front door into the night air, leaving them stunned in my living room. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my couch staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of muffled voices from the other room. They hadn't left yet. Tyler's game controller clicked a couple more times before he finally shut it off, and I could hear my parents whispering, probably plotting their next family meeting. My chest felt tight. This house had been my sanctuary, the thing I had worked toward for years, and now it felt invaded. Around 2 a.m., I finally heard the front door close. When I got up the next morning, the boxes were still there. Tyler hadn't moved a thing. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring at them. The nerve, the sheer entitlement. A part of me wanted to toss them all out onto the lawn and send Tyler a picture of the pile with a cheery, "Come pick up your stuff" message. But another part of me, the tired, emotionally wrung out part, just sat there, numb. That day I barely spoke to anyone. My phone buzzed every hour with messages from Mom. "We didn't mean to upset you last night. We just want what's best for everyone. Tyler can't afford rent right now. Be reasonable. We'll pay you back somehow. Family comes first." The last one really got to me. "Pay me back?" As if this was some kind of business transaction. I stared at the text, feeling a lump in my throat. Was I really that alone in this family? Just a walking wallet they could guilt trip whenever it was convenient? By Sunday evening, I finally cracked and called my best friend, Noah. He's one of those friends who can make you laugh even when you're furious, and I needed that right now. "Dude," I said as soon as he answered, "you are not going to believe the week I just had." I unloaded everything. The dinner, the key, the boxes, the threats about lawyers. Noah listened quietly for a while, then let out a low whistle. "Man, that's next level. They actually rekeyed your house without asking? That's not just pushy, that's illegal." "Yeah," I said, running a hand over my face. "But if I push back too hard, I'm the bad guy. The ungrateful son. The selfish brother." "Alex," he said, and his voice turned serious. "You are not the bad guy here. They're taking advantage of you. Period." I sank deeper into my chair. I don't know what to do. If I fight this, it's going to turn into World War III. If I don't, I might as well hand them the deed and move into the basement as their tenant. There was a pause. Then Noah said, "Maybe it's time to stop playing defense." That stuck with me long after we hung up. The next morning, I drove to work in a haze, barely noticing the music on the radio. My productivity tanked. I caught myself staring at spreadsheets for minutes at a time without actually processing anything. I hated feeling this distracted. I prided myself on being the calm, put-together one in my family. But every time my phone buzzed, a knot twisted in my stomach. By Wednesday, the situation had escalated again. I came home to find Tyler's car in the driveway, again, and this time there was music blasting from my living room. Not just any music, but his favorite obnoxious rap playlist, the one that rattled the walls. I stepped inside to find him sprawled on my couch with his feet on my coffee table. He didn't even pause the music. "Hey," he said casually, "Mom dropped off some groceries for me earlier. Hope that's cool." I stared at him. "Why are you here?" He shrugged. "Because this is my house too now, apparently." I didn't even answer. I just turned around and went into my bedroom, closing the door behind me. For the first time since buying the house, I locked it. I sat on my bed, staring at the floor. This was it, my lowest point. My house didn't feel like mine. My parents had chosen Tyler over me, no matter how much I had done for them. I couldn't even walk into my own living room without bracing for a confrontation. That night, I made a decision. I grabbed a notepad and started writing. Every dollar I'd given my parents over the last 3 years. Every favor I'd done for Tyler. Every promise they'd made that they were now breaking. By the time I was done, the list was 2 pages long. Looking at it in black and white made something inside me shift. This wasn't just about Tyler freeloading anymore. This was about respect, about boundaries, about the fact that they were willing to steamroll me, my finances, and my life just to keep Tyler comfortable. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I stopped letting them. I started researching, quietly, late at night, in bed with my laptop balanced on my knees. I looked up tenancy laws in my state. I read forums about how to deal with unwanted guests. I even looked into home security systems, because apparently, I couldn't trust my own family not to show up uninvited. The more I read, the calmer I felt. Knowledge was power, and if they were going to treat this like a battle, I was going to come prepared. I didn't confront anyone right away. Instead, I started putting small plans in motion. I called a locksmith, a different one, and had the locks changed again, this time with high security keys that couldn't be copied without my permission. I set up cameras by the front door and in the garage. Most importantly, I started keeping receipts for everything. Every grocery run, every utility bill, every extra expense. If they wanted to argue about fairness, I was going to have documentation. And through all of this, I kept my cool. I was polite when Mom texted. I was civil when Dad called. I didn't rise to Tyler's bait when he sent me memes about being the Grinch who stole free rent. But inside, I was done being the nice guy. Because if they thought this was over, if they thought I was just going to roll over and let them take over my life, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. After that night with my notepad, something shifted in me. I woke up the next morning with a strange sense of calm, almost like I had been through the worst of the storm and was now standing in the eye of it. The house was still quiet. Tyler hadn't dared show up again since I rekeyed the locks for the second time, and I made myself breakfast, savoring the silence. It was the first time in weeks that I actually felt in control. At work, I buried myself in projects, not just as a distraction, but because I suddenly had this renewed drive to build something for myself. The more I thought about the situation at home, the more I realized that my best move wasn't just to defend what I had. It was to grow stronger, to make myself so untouchable that no one could hold anything over me again. And almost as if the universe was rewarding me for finally standing up for myself, opportunities started showing up. That very week, my boss called me into his office. "Alex," he said, "we've been impressed with the work you've been doing lately. There's a management position opening up, and I think you'd be perfect for it. It comes with a raise, a significant one." I walked out of that office grinning like an idiot. Not just because of the money, though, let's be honest, the raise was nice, but because it felt like confirmation that I was on the right path. I wasn't going to let my family guilt me into giving up what I had worked for. I was going to build even more. With the raise, I was finally able to start setting aside serious savings for the first time since buying the house. I opened a separate account just for future investments. And yes, a little part of me labeled it in my head as revenge fund, even though it was mostly just for financial security. Meanwhile, the house started feeling like a sanctuary again. I redecorated the spare bedroom Tyler had been eyeing, turning it into a home office. I bought myself a nice desk, hung some art on the walls, and every time I sat down to work in there, I felt a little jolt of satisfaction knowing it wasn't a space for him anymore. The cameras I installed gave me peace of mind, too. No more wondering if someone had been in my house while I was gone. Now I could check my phone and see for myself. It wasn't just material stuff, though. I started hitting the gym again, something I hadn't done consistently since college. At first, it was just to burn off the stress, but soon enough, I started feeling better, stronger, sharper, more focused. Even my friends noticed the change. "Man, you're glowing," Noah said one night when we grabbed a beer. "I was worried you were going to spiral for a while there, but you look like you've got everything handled." I smirked. "Oh, I've got plans." And I did. I started documenting everything. Every interaction with my parents and Tyler went into a little folder on my computer. Dates, times, screenshots of texts, summaries of calls. It wasn't about being paranoid. It was about being prepared. And slowly, the tone from my family began to shift. At first, they had been angry, accusing me of turning my back on them. But now the messages were more cautious, almost pleading. "Mom, Tyler's looking at some apartments this week. Maybe you can help him with the deposit? Dad, we all just want things to go back to normal." I didn't respond right away. When I did, my replies were calm and measured. "I'm glad Tyler's looking for a place," I texted back. "That's the right move for everyone." When Mom asked about the deposit again, I simply replied, "No, I've already helped enough." It felt good. No, it felt amazing to set boundaries without guilt. And maybe it was a little petty, but I started posting pictures of my progress online. The newly redecorated office, the flowers I planted in the backyard, even the new locks on the doors with a caption that said, "Finally got the security upgrade I wanted. Love feeling safe in my own home." Tyler didn't comment directly, but I saw he viewed every story. By the time summer rolled around, I was in a completely different place emotionally. I had paid off a chunk of my mortgage with my raise. I was in the best shape of my life, and I had a plan, a real, solid plan, for how I was going to make sure this never happened again. The plan wasn't just about Tyler. It was about changing the dynamic entirely, making it clear that I wasn't just the family ATM, the one they could guilt trip into doing whatever they wanted. And then, just when things were finally starting to settle, the final straw arrived. One Friday afternoon, I came home to find a note taped to my door. It was from Tyler. "Since you won't help me, I'm staying at Mom and Dad's for now. But they agree I deserve some of the space here since you wouldn't have made it without them. We'll be talking to someone about that soon." I read the note twice, then 3 times, then felt a slow smile creep across my face. Not because I was happy, far from it, but because this was exactly the opening I needed. If they wanted to escalate this into something formal, I was more than ready. And this time, I wasn't just going to defend myself. This time, I was going to make sure there was no coming back from what I was about to do. When I found that note from Tyler on my door, I didn't crumple it up or throw it away. I pinned it to my fridge. A reminder, not just of his entitlement, but of how far they were willing to go to pressure me. If they really were planning to talk to someone about what was fair, I needed to be ready. And I wasn't just ready to defend myself anymore. I wanted to make a statement, one they wouldn't forget. That weekend, I drove to my parents' house. Not to argue. I didn't even plan to see them. I just needed to pick up some old paperwork they kept in their filing cabinet, stuff from when I was in college. But when I got there, I noticed something strange. Mom and Dad's car were both gone, and Tyler's car was in the driveway. I debated leaving, but curiosity got the better of me. I unlocked the side door. Yes, I still had a key to their house, though after everything that had happened, I was starting to think about returning it, and stepped inside. Tyler was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open, earbuds in. He didn't notice me at first. I should have just grabbed my papers and left, but when I glanced at his screen as I passed, I froze. He was filling out a form, an application for emergency rental assistance. Now, there's nothing wrong with that in general, but here's the thing. I knew exactly how much Tyler made. He wasn't eligible. And worse, I recognized the address he had listed. It wasn't Mom and Dad's house. It was mine. I stood there, staring at the screen, until he finally looked up. "Hey," he said casually, pulling out one earbud. "Didn't know you were coming by." I kept my voice neutral. "What are you doing?" He hesitated for a second. "Just filling out some forms." "For emergency rental assistance," I said, nodding toward the laptop. He shrugged. "Yeah, they said I might qualify if I show I've got nowhere else to go." "But you do have somewhere else to go," I said, trying to keep my temper in check. "You're literally staying here. And you put my address on there." He grinned. Actually grinned, like this was all a big joke. "Relax. It's just paperwork. If I get approved, it's free money. Might even help cover your mortgage, you know? Win-win." I stared at him, stunned. That's fraud, Tyler. He rolled his eyes. No one's going to check that closely. You worry too much. I walked out before I said something I'd regret, but my mind was spinning. When I got home, I sat down at my computer and started digging. Not just into rental assistance programs, but into every legal document related to my house. Deed, mortgage agreement, property tax records, everything. What I found made my stomach twist and then slowly relax. Because there it was, in black and white. I was the sole owner. No one else's name appeared anywhere. Not my parents, not Tyler, not a single hint of family contributions that could be used to claim equity. It was all mine. But that wasn't the only thing I discovered. While combing through my documents, I came across a clause in my homeowner's insurance policy, one I hadn't paid much attention to before. It specifically covered legal costs related to property disputes, including unauthorized occupancy. That was the moment the pieces started to click into place. I didn't just have the moral high ground. I had the legal high ground, too. And if they really wanted to push this, I could take it all the way and have backup from my insurance to cover the fight. Still, I wasn't going to act rashly. I wanted to be smart about this. I wanted every step documented so thoroughly that when the hammer finally dropped, there would be no room for argument. So I started keeping even more detailed records. Every time Tyler showed up, I wrote it down. Every message from my parents went into a folder. I even saved that note on my door and scanned it, just in case it went missing later. I also quietly upgraded my security system. The cameras now recorded in high resolution and saved everything to a cloud account. If Tyler ever tried to enter without permission again, I'd have video proof. Meanwhile, at work, I leaned into my promotion. I started networking with some of the company's legal and compliance folks. Just casual conversations, nothing too obvious, and picked up a few tips about how to handle property disputes. The more I learned, the more confident I became. By late summer, I had turned the spare bedroom into not just a home office, but a kind of command center. Files neatly organized, cameras monitored from my desk, all communications documented and sorted. And then came the phone call that set everything in motion. It was a Tuesday evening when Mom called, her voice unusually soft. "Alex," she said, "we've been talking, and we still think you're being too hard on Tyler. He's going through a lot right now. You should let him stay until he gets back on his feet." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. Instead, I said, very calmly, "If Tyler ever steps foot in my house again without my permission, I will treat it as trespassing. I need you to understand that." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Mom said, "I can't believe you'd do this to your own brother. I can't believe you'd keep choosing him over respecting my boundaries." I replied and hung up. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. In fact, I felt something else entirely: control. That night, I sat at my desk and finalized my plan. This wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be messy. It was going to be precise, legal, and impossible to undo. And when it was done, they'd never try to pull something like this again. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity I hadn't felt in months. No anger, no anxiety, just purpose. If they wanted this to be a battle, I was ready. The first step was locking down the house legally. I called a local attorney I'd been referred to by one of the compliance guys at work. We met for coffee that afternoon, and I laid out everything. The key situation, the threats about taking what's fair, the note Tyler left, even the rental assistance form he'd been filling out. When I finished, the attorney leaned back and let out a low whistle. "You've documented everything?" "Every text, every call, every visit," I said, sliding the neatly organized folder across the table. She flipped through it, nodding. "You've done half my job for me. If they try anything at all, you'll win. But honestly, you might not even have to go that far. A formal cease and desist letter would probably be enough to make them back off." I grinned. "Perfect. Let's do it." By the end of the week, a beautifully worded letter was ready to go, professional, calm, and very clear. It outlined that I was the sole owner of the property, that any unauthorized entry would be treated as trespassing, and that any attempts to claim tenancy or force shared occupancy would be met with legal action. But I wasn't done yet. The next step was Tyler's little attempt at free money. I contacted the rental assistance program he had applied to, explained that my house was being falsely listed as his residence, and provided documentation that he was not a tenant and had never paid rent. The woman on the phone was polite but firm. Fraudulent applications were taken seriously, and she assured me that his claim would be flagged and investigated. Then, just to be thorough, I notified my homeowner's insurance of the situation. Not because I expected them to pay anything yet, but because I wanted a paper trail showing that I was taking proactive steps to protect my property. By Friday, the cease and desist letter had been sent by certified mail to my parents' address. I didn't hear anything for 2 days. Then Sunday night, my phone rang. It was Dad. "What is this?" he barked as soon as I picked up. "A legal letter? Against your own family?" I kept my voice level. "Yes, against anyone who tries to enter my house without permission. That includes Tyler. You've gone too far this time, Alex. This is outrageous." "What's outrageous?" I said evenly. "Is that you had my house rekeyed behind my back, tried to move Tyler in without my consent, and threatened to get lawyers involved. I've done nothing but protect what's mine." There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, Dad said, "Your mother is very upset." "I'm sure she is," I said calmly. "But this stops now. I'm done being the family's safety net. Tyler is not my responsibility. If he needs help, he can find his own way, just like I did." I hung up before he could reply. The next day, I came home from work and saw something that nearly made me laugh out loud. Tyler's boxes were gone. Completely gone. But my plan wasn't just about removing Tyler from the house. It was about making sure the message was crystal clear. So I took it one step further. I drafted a polite but firm message in the family group chat. "I want to be very clear moving forward. My house is off limits unless I invite you. There will be no spare keys. No dropping off groceries. No letting yourselves in while I'm at work. I have cameras now. If anyone enters without permission, I will treat it as trespassing and involve the police. This is not up for debate." I hit send and put my phone down. For a few minutes, there was silence. Then the messages started rolling in. "Mom, I can't believe you'd talk to us this way. Tyler, you're seriously overreacting, man. Dad, we raised you better than this." I didn't reply. Instead, I posted a picture to my Instagram story, a glass of wine on my back deck, my feet up on the railing, and the caption, "Finally enjoying my home in peace." Within minutes, I saw their little profile icons pop up as they viewed it. And just like that, the group chat went quiet. But I still had one more card to play. A week later, I got a call from the rental assistance office. They confirmed that Tyler's application had been officially denied and flagged for attempted fraud. That meant he wouldn't just be rejected, but his name would now be on a list of people whose future applications would face extra scrutiny. I didn't tell him right away. I waited until Saturday morning, when I knew he'd be home, and sent him a short text. "By the way, I told the rental assistance program you were falsely listing my house as your residence. You might want to stick to honest applications from now on." The typing bubbles popped up, disappeared, popped up again. Finally, all he sent back was, "You're unbelievable." I smiled and locked my phone. No yelling, no drama, just quiet, calculated moves that left me exactly where I wanted to be, in control, with my house and my boundaries completely protected. And yet, a part of me knew there was still one final conversation that needed to happen, face to face, before I could really call this done. Because as satisfying as this was, I wanted them to look me in the eye and understand that this wasn't about money or space or even Tyler. This was about respect. It took another week before I heard from them again. The group chat stayed silent, my phone blissfully free of guilt trip notifications, and for the first time in months, I was able to wake up without feeling that knot in my stomach. But I knew it wasn't truly over, so I decided to finish it. I texted Mom and Dad and invited them over for Sunday dinner. No Tyler this time. I made that clear. Mom tried to argue, he's part of this family too, but I shut it down with a simple reply. This conversation is between us. If he comes, the door will stay locked. When Sunday rolled around, I made the house spotless. I set the table the way I had the night of that first dinner, candles and everything, like I was rewinding to the night it all began. Only this time, I was in control. When they arrived, they looked uneasy. Mom's eyes darted around the house like she was checking to see if anything had changed. Dad kept his jaw tight. We sat down, and for a while, no one spoke. Finally, Mom broke the silence. "Alex," she said softly, "we just don't understand why you're being so cold. We're your family." I nodded. "You are, and I love you both. But we need to be honest about what's happened." I stood up and placed a folder on the table, the same one I'd shown my attorney. This is every dollar I've given you over the past 3 years. Every transfer, every receipt. I don't say this to make you feel bad. I say this because you've acted like I owe you something. I don't. I've been helping you because I wanted to, not because I had to. Dad opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. Please, just let me finish. I sat back down and looked at both of them. When you tried to force Tyler into this house, when you rekeyed my locks without asking, when you threatened to talk to a lawyer, that crossed a line. This house is mine. I worked for it. And I will never let anyone, not even family, disrespect that again. Mom's face crumpled a little, but I kept going. You've called me selfish, ungrateful, a control freak. But here's what I've realized. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's healthy. And if respecting those boundaries feels like a punishment to you, maybe that says more about how you've been treating me than it does about me. Dad leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. So what now? He asked finally. Now, I said, feeling the calm settle over me again. Now things change. Tyler is not welcome here unless I invite him. There will be no more spare keys. No more unannounced visits. No more dropping off groceries or using this house like it's a family storage unit. If that's too much for you to accept, then maybe we need some space for a while. Mom wiped at her eyes, silent. Dad nodded slowly. I don't agree with how you've handled this, he said, but I can see you're serious. I am, I said simply. We finished dinner mostly in silence, but it wasn't the tense, angry silence from before. This was quieter, heavier, the kind of silence that means something has shifted permanently. When they left, Mom gave me a hesitant hug at the door. I still think you're being too harsh, she said, but I guess we needed to hear this. Yeah, I said, opening the door for them. I think we all did. After they drove away, I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the taillights disappear. The house was quiet again, not empty, not invaded, just quiet. I walked back to the kitchen, blew out the candles, and looked around at the space I had fought so hard to protect. For the first time since buying it, I didn't just feel like I owned a house. I felt like I owned my life. I took the folder from the table, opened the trash can, and dropped it in. Not because I needed to, but because I no longer had anything to prove. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, stepped out onto the deck, and watched the sunset over my backyard. And as the last of the light faded, I said it out loud, not to anyone else, just to myself. It's mine. Finally, it's mine. And this time, there was no one left to argue. Imagine working nonstop to build a business from nothing only for your own parents to mock you every step of the way. But the moment you find success, suddenly, they want to cut. That's exactly what happened to me. They laughed at my stupid little business for years until I became more successful than them. Now they think they deserve a piece? Yeah, not happening. Here's how it all went down. I'm Alex, 26, and I've been running my own online business for a little over 3 years now. It started as a side gig while I was still in college, just trying to make a bit of extra cash while balancing assignments and classes. It wasn't anything major at first, just a small dropshipping store selling gadgets. But, like a lot of these side hustles, it started to snowball. Over time, I grew the business, learned about marketing, branding, and all that jazz, and eventually, it started to make some serious money. At first, my parents were supportive in it you'll grow out of it kind of way. You know the type. The, oh, that's cute, sweetie, but what's your real plan? Vibe. They thought it was a phase, a silly little hobby that would fizzle out once I graduated and got a real job. My dad would constantly tell me to focus on my studies, and my mom would mention how people don't really make a living from online businesses. You need to be practical. I don't blame them entirely. Older generations tend to be skeptical about newer, less traditional paths to success. But at the time, I felt like I was building something that could work long term. Now, I'm not saying my parents are bad people. They're just, well, a little old-fashioned. They've always had steady 9 to 5 jobs, and the idea of running a business from your bedroom or a coffee shop seemed alien to them. My dad's a lawyer, and my mom works as a nurse. They both grew up with very clear ideas about what success looked like. You go to school, you get a degree, you work a traditional job, and that's the path. Anything else is just a distraction. But that didn't stop me. I kept grinding, working on my business late at night after classes, reading books, watching YouTube tutorials, and slowly but surely, I started to turn a profit. The side hustle that had started as just a way to buy some extra gear for myself eventually became my full-time job. The first year was tough. Lots of sleepless nights, moments where I thought it would all fall apart. But by year 2, things started to click. I had my own website, a steady stream of customers, and most importantly, I wasn't just making a little extra pocket money anymore. I was making enough to pay rent, buy a car, and even take a vacation every once in a while. And that's when the drama started. It was Christmas of my 3rd year running the business when it really hit the fan. My parents invited me over for dinner like they always do, and we were sitting around the table, enjoying some food. My mom was going on about how the economy is so tough right now and people just don't have disposable income anymore. I wasn't really paying attention, honestly. I was thinking about a new product I was about to launch, but then my dad chimed in. "You know, Alex," he said, looking at me over the rim of his glass, "it's nice that you're making money from this little business of yours, but don't you think it's time you focused on something more serious? People like you don't usually make it big doing whatever it is you're doing." I could feel my face flush. I'd heard this before, of course, but this time it was different. He'd always been a little condescending, but this felt like a direct jab. Like he thought what I was doing didn't matter. I put my fork down. "Dad, I am focusing on something serious. This is my business, and it's working. I've made more this year than you and Mom combined." My mom shot me a disapproving look, and my dad scoffed. "Oh, come on, Alex. That's just some internet nonsense. You can't be serious." I could feel the anger rising in me, but I stayed calm. "I'm serious, Dad. I'm making enough money to support myself, and I'm doing something that makes me happy. You guys have always been so focused on the idea of a real job, but I'm living my dream. I don't need a 9 to 5 to be successful." There was a long silence. My parents exchanged a look. My dad's face darkened. "Don't get too cocky, Alex," he said, voice stern. "You're not as special as you think. People fail at this stuff all the time. You'll see." And that was that. The rest of the evening was awkward and filled with forced small talk. But inside, I was furious. It wasn't just that they didn't believe in me. It was that they couldn't even try to understand. They saw my success as a fluke, and that hurt more than I wanted to admit. But things only got worse after that. Over the next few months, my business continued to grow. I expanded into new markets, hired a small team, and even started getting some recognition in the industry. And as it got bigger, so did my parents' attitude. At first, they continued their, "Oh, that's cute," routine. But then it became clear that they were getting jealous. My dad would make little comments whenever I'd talk about my success. "Must be nice to have all that free time to play on your computer." It started to get under my skin, but I kept my mouth shut, focusing on growing my business. I wasn't going to let their negativity stop me. Then, about 6 months ago, it all came to a head. I was sitting at home one Saturday afternoon, working on a new product launch, when I got a call from my mom. She was practically giddy on the phone, which was a bit unusual for her. "Alex, you'll never guess who called me today." "Who?" I asked, distracted. "Your dad's old business partner. He was asking about you, asking if you could help him with some marketing for his law firm. He said he was impressed with what you've been doing and he wants to offer you a job." "Isn't that amazing?" I nearly dropped my phone. "Wait, a job?" "Yeah," she said, still beaming. "He's offering you a position at his firm to handle all their online marketing. It's a great opportunity, Alex. You'll be set for life if you take it." I was floored. My parents had just spent the past 3 years telling me my business was a joke, and now suddenly they wanted me to work for some guy in a real job just because he noticed my success? They couldn't have been more out of touch. "I'm not interested," I said, trying to keep my cool. "I'm doing just fine with my business. I don't need to work for anyone else." "Well, I think you're being a little stubborn, don't you? This could really help us, Alex." There it was. We could really use the money, and it's a great career move for you. I let out a deep breath. "No, Mom. I don't need a job, and I'm not going to work for anyone else. I'm successful on my own." That's when the conversation took a turn. "Alex," she said, her voice a little more serious now. "If you're going to continue doing this business thing, you need to understand that you owe us something. After all the money we spent on your education, you could at least help us out a little. It's the least you can do." My stomach dropped. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "You want me to pay you back?" I asked, incredulous. "Well," she said, "you've been successful now. We could use a little help. You owe it to us." I laughed bitterly. "You're kidding, right?" "I'm serious, Alex. You've got the money now. It's only fair." It was like a switch flipped in my brain. All that pent-up anger I'd been feeling over the years finally bubbled to the surface. They hadn't just ignored my success. They were actively trying to take advantage of it. That's when I decided it was time to teach them a lesson, but I wasn't sure exactly how to do it yet. I had to think it through carefully. I sat there, staring at my phone, not entirely sure how to process what my mom had just said. A cold wave of disbelief washed over me, followed by anger. It felt like a punch to the gut. My parents, who'd spent years belittling my business, now wanted me to hand over my success like it was some kind of inheritance they were entitled to. Mom, are you seriously asking me to pay you back for all the money you spent on my education? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. You've never even believed in what I'm doing. And now you want to cut because it's working? That's not how this works. There was a brief pause on the other end. Then she sighed. Alex, you're making this harder than it needs to be. We've supported you all these years, and now that you're doing well, we should get something out of it. I wanted to scream, to tell her how ridiculous she sounded, but I knew if I lost my cool, it would only give her more ammunition to accuse me of being ungrateful. I'm not asking for anything, Alex, she continued, her voice softening. I'm just saying, help us out a little. You don't have to give us all your money. I cut her off. No, that's not happening. There was a long silence, and for a moment, I thought maybe she was finally getting it. But then, her voice came back, quieter, more insistent. You're being selfish, Alex. Don't forget who helped you get where you are. All this could have been so much harder if we didn't help you out in the beginning. The word stung. It was like a slap in the face, but it also gave me the clarity I needed. My whole life, I had been expected to follow their rules, fit into their world. I'd never been allowed to chart my own course without being reminded of their sacrifices and how much they had helped me along the way. Well, you didn't help me by making fun of what I was doing. You didn't help me when you said it was just a phase. You didn't believe in me until it started making money. So no, I don't owe you anything. And that was when I heard it, the sharp intake of breath, the quiet, sharp gasp that told me my mom was pissed. Alex, she said, her voice trembling now, don't talk to me like that. You're not a little kid anymore. You can't just ignore everything we did for you. I'm not ignoring it. I snapped, my patience starting to wear thin. But you need to understand something. I built this on my own. No one helped me. And you know what? I don't need to pay you back for it. Fine, she said, her voice cold now. You'll see. Just remember, you wouldn't have gotten this far without us. I hung up. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I was shaking. I couldn't believe what had just happened. It felt like everything had shifted. My parents had always been distant in their support of my business. But now they were entitled. It was like they had been waiting for the moment when they could lay claim to my success. And I wasn't going to let that happen. For the next couple of weeks, I stewed on it. I didn't talk to them. I couldn't. The more I thought about how they'd treated me, the angrier I became. It wasn't just the money they wanted. It was the recognition. They couldn't stand the fact that I was successful on my own terms. But the idea of letting them walk all over me, of giving in to their demands, wasn't an option anymore. I wasn't going to be the nice, obedient son who bent over backward to keep the peace. No, I was done. I started thinking about the ways I could hit them where it would hurt them most. They wanted money? Fine. But what they didn't understand was that my business was more than just money. It was my independence. It was my ability to stand on my own 2 feet, and that was something they could never take away from me, no matter how much they tried. And then, a few days later, I got an idea. I was at my computer, going over some business reports, when I checked my emails. One of the emails that stood out to me was from an old friend of mine from college, John. He'd been a marketing guru back in school and had gone on to do pretty well for himself. I hadn't spoken to him in months, but when I opened the email, I saw that it was about a potential partnership. John had recently started working with a new startup, and they were looking to partner with small businesses like mine. As I read through the details of the proposal, it hit me. If I accepted this deal, it would be huge. It wasn't just about the money. It was about expanding my business into a new market and solidifying my reputation as a real player in the industry. The kind of partnership that my parents, in all their practicality, would never even dream of. And that's when the plan started to form in my head. I decided to take the deal. But there was a catch. John's company was offering to do a series of press releases and interviews for me. Big-name publications, online blogs, and even some local news stations. If I took the deal, my business would be thrust into the public eye. Everyone would know who I was, including my parents. I could already imagine their faces when they saw the first article about me. When they read about how my business had just secured a partnership with a top-tier company. When they saw my name in big letters on the front page of a website they'd probably never even heard of. I wasn't going to ask for their approval anymore. I was going to make them see how wrong they were. As the press releases went live, I could feel the tension building. I knew they were bound to find out soon, and I couldn't wait to see how they reacted. They'd been so sure I wouldn't make it, so sure I'd fail. But I wasn't going to fail. I was going to keep growing, keep expanding, and keep succeeding until I had enough of my own to show them that I didn't need their validation anymore. And then, one afternoon, a couple of weeks later, I got the call. It was from my dad. "Alex," he said, his voice tight, "we need to talk." I could feel my pulse quicken. About what? I saw the article. I didn't even have to ask which article. I already knew. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my cool. "Pretty impressive, huh?" He didn't respond immediately. Instead, there was a long, uncomfortable silence. Finally, he spoke again, his tone softer, almost defeated. "We need to talk. In person." I leaned back in my chair, gripping the phone a little tighter. My dad's tone was different, less demanding, more measured, but I wasn't going to be fooled. I knew how this worked. They saw something they wanted, and now they were trying to play nice to get it. "I'm busy," I said, keeping my voice flat. "If you have something to say, you can say it now." "Alex," he sighed, and for a second, I could almost hear the frustration bleeding through. "Come on. We just want to talk. Face to face." I could have laughed. Just weeks ago, they were mocking my stupid little business, and now they wanted to sit down and have a serious discussion? "Why?" I asked. "You made it pretty clear what you thought about my business before. What's changed?" A pause. "Things are just different now," he said carefully. "Your mother and I, we just think maybe there's a way we can all work together." There it was. I couldn't stop the bitter smile from creeping onto my face. "You mean you want money?" "Alex, no, don't Alex me," I cut him off. "Let's be honest here. If my business had failed, you wouldn't be calling me right now. You wouldn't be inviting me over for a talk. You'd still be laughing about how I should have stuck to a real job. But now that I've made something of myself, suddenly you care." I let out a dry laugh. "That's funny. Don't be like this," he said, his voice sharper now. "We're still your parents." "And that means what, exactly?" I shot back. "That I owe you for everything I've ever done? That just because you raised me, I have to hand over my success like it's some family heirloom?" I could hear him take a deep breath. "You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be." "No," I said firmly. "I'm just finally seeing things clearly." Another silence. This time, it stretched on longer, the weight of it heavy between us. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "Fine. If that's how you feel." Click. I stared at my phone. He hung up on me. I should have felt angry. I should have been frustrated. Instead, I felt relieved. For the first time in years, I had set a boundary and held it. No guilt. No second guessing. Just a firm, undeniable line in the sand. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. For the next few weeks, I braced myself for the fallout. And sure enough, it came. First, it was the passive-aggressive text from my mom. "I don't understand why you're being so cold to us, Alex. We only ever wanted what was best for you. You don't just turn your back on family. That's not how we raised you." Then, the guilt tripping. "You know, your father and I are struggling right now. We've done so much for you. The least you could do is help us out just a little." I didn't respond. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me into feeling responsible for their situation. If they were struggling financially, it wasn't because of me. It wasn't like they had ever invested in my business or supported me when I needed help. They had mocked me, laughed at me, and now they wanted to act like they were owed something? I ignored the messages. Then came the escalation. One evening, I was working late at my office when I got a call from an unknown number. I wouldn't have answered, but something told me to pick up. "Hello, Alex." It was my mom, but something was off. Her voice was tight, almost like she was holding back anger. I sighed. "What is it? Why didn't you tell us you moved offices?" My stomach dropped. "How did you know that?" There was a long pause, and then she said it. "We came by." My skin went cold. "They came by?" "I wanted to surprise you," she continued, her voice sickly sweet, but I could hear the frustration beneath it. "But imagine my shock when I realized you weren't even working out of your old place anymore." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "You had no right to do that." "Excuse me." "You heard me," I snapped. "You don't just show up unannounced. That's not normal." That's not okay. Oh, so now we need permission to visit our own son, she said, her voice sharp. We've always been there for you, Alex. We've always been your family. And now that you're making money, you're acting like we're strangers. I clenched my jaw. That's because you were strangers to my success, I said coldly. You weren't there when I was struggling. You weren't there when I was putting in 16-hour days to build this from nothing. You only care now because it benefits you. She scoffed. You're unbelievable. I'm starting to wonder if we even raised you right. That hit me, but not in the way she intended. Because the truth was, I wasn't the same person they raised. I had fought, worked, and bled for my success on my own terms. And I wasn't about to let them take any of it from me. You didn't, I said. I raised myself. And with that, I hung up. The next morning, I got a text from my dad. You've made your choice, Alex. But don't forget, you're not the only one who can play hardball. I stared at the message. What did that mean? I had no idea what they were planning. I didn't reply to my dad's text. I didn't need to. I already knew what was coming. The thing about my parents was that they didn't just lose. They didn't just let things go. If they couldn't guilt me, they'd try to force my hand. And if that failed, they'd do what they always did, make themselves the victims. Sure enough, the fallout started almost immediately. First, it was the relatives. Alex, your parents are so hurt. They don't understand why you're shutting them out. Family is more important than money. You'll regret this one day. They did everything for you. The least you could do is give back. I ignored every single message. I wasn't about to get dragged into another round of manipulation. Then, they went public. I found out through a friend that my mom had taken to social media, posting a long, dramatic rant about how certain children forget where they come from once they get a little success. She never named me outright, but the message was clear. She talked about how they sacrificed so much for me, how they always supported my dreams, which was a blatant lie, how they were so proud of what I built but heartbroken that I had turned my back on my family. I rolled my eyes. The comments were exactly what I expected. A bunch of well-meaning but clueless people sympathizing with them, telling them how ungrateful I was, how they deserved better. I didn't bother defending myself. I knew the truth. And the people who actually mattered knew it too. But then they crossed the line. They showed up at my office. I was in the middle of a meeting when my assistant buzzed me. Alex? There's a man and a woman here. They say they're your parents. My stomach dropped. I'll handle it, I said, getting up. When I walked out, I found them standing in the lobby, my mom looking around like she belonged there, my dad standing stiffly beside her. Alex, she said, her voice bright and cheerful, like this was a normal visit. I folded my arms. What are you doing here? My dad sighed, shaking his head. This is ridiculous. We're family. We shouldn't be fighting like this. We just want to talk, my mom added, clasping her hands together like she was pleading. I stared at them, barely able to believe the audacity. You showed up uninvited to my place of business, I said, voice low and controlled. Do you have any idea how insane that is? My dad's face darkened. You're making this harder than it needs to be. No, you are. I shot back. I told you my answer. I don't owe you anything. I'm not giving you money. I'm not letting you worm your way into my business. And I am done with the guilt trips. My mom's expression twisted. So you're really going to cut us off? Just like that? Yes. That one word hung in the air, heavy and final. You raised me, I continued. And for that, I'll always be grateful. But being my parents doesn't mean you get unlimited access to my life. It doesn't mean you get to take from me just because you don't like how things turned out. My dad's jaw clenched. You'll regret this. I let out a short, humorless laugh. No, I really won't. I turned to my assistant. If they ever show up here again, call security. Then I walked away. That was the last time I saw them. They tried to reach out a few more times. More texts, more calls, more messages from flying monkeys trying to guilt me into reconnecting. I ignored all of it. It's been over a year now. At first, it felt strange. There was this lingering guilt, this tiny voice in my head whispering, but they're your parents. But over time, that voice got quieter. Because the truth is, my life is better without them in it. My business is thriving. I'm surrounded by people who actually support me, who don't see me as a walking ATM or a means to an end. And for the first time in my life, I feel free. So, Reddit, what do you think? Was I too harsh? Or was cutting them off the only option? My name is Ryan, and I'm 33 years old. I still remember the exact sound of the lock turning on my 18th birthday, as if someone had closed not just a door, but an entire chapter of my life. My parents stood inside the house, arms crossed, while I stood outside with nothing but a duffel bag of clothes and a set of car keys. My mom said flatly, "You're an adult now? You're on your own." My dad added, almost like it was a punchline to a joke, "Consider it a lesson in life." Then the door shut. The lights inside flickered off. I was left staring at my own reflection in the darkened window of the home I'd grown up in, the home that suddenly wasn't mine anymore. I tried to laugh it off at first, convincing myself that maybe they were bluffing, that it was some twisted test of independence. But when I came back the next morning, knocking on the door with a mixture of hope and anger, no one answered. The locks had been changed. The garage door code didn't work anymore. My phone buzzed with a single text from my mother. "We told you. Good luck." That was it. No explanation, no guidance, no safety net. Just a void where my family used to be. I spent the next months sleeping in the back seat of my beat-up car. It wasn't much, just an old sedan that rattled every time I turned the key, but it was the only shelter I had. Nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, staring up through the smudged windshield at the sky, replaying every conversation I'd ever had with my parents, trying to pinpoint when I became so disposable to them. I'd ask myself if I had missed some sign, some clue that they'd been planning this. But the truth was, they had always been cold, always quick to remind me that I wasn't the golden child. That was my sister, Emily, the one who followed every rule, got straight A's, and never questioned their authority. Meanwhile, I was the kid who liked drawing, who skipped football practice, who dreamed of moving to the city and doing something different. In their eyes, I was a disappointment waiting to happen. And on my 18th birthday, they decided to cut their losses. During those car-sleeping months, I cycled through every possible emotion. At first, there was anger, a raw, searing anger that made me want to storm back into the house and scream at them until they understood what they'd done. But that anger eventually collapsed into despair. I would sit in the driver's seat with the keys dangling in my hands, feeling the weight of their words pressing down on me. "You're on your own now." It wasn't just a sentence, it was a life sentence. Yet somewhere in that darkness, I found a small ember of determination. If they thought I couldn't make it, then I had no choice but to prove them wrong. The first job I picked up was at a gas station, working the overnight shift. It wasn't glamorous. I stocked shelves, cleaned bathrooms, and swept floors at 3 a.m. while the rest of the world slept, but it gave me a paycheck. I showered in the grimy employee bathroom and bought dollar burgers from the drive-thru down the road. Every night, I told myself it was temporary, that if I just kept moving forward, things would change. Slowly, that ember of determination grew into something steadier. I started saving money, little by little, until I could rent a tiny studio apartment. It wasn't much bigger than my car, but it had 4 walls, a bed, and a door that I could lock from the inside. For the first time, I didn't feel like the world could push me out. But the distance between me and my parents wasn't just physical. It became emotional, too. I stopped calling, stopped checking if maybe they had softened. I convinced myself they didn't exist, that family was a concept I had to build from scratch on my own. I worked harder than I ever thought I could. First at that gas station, then at a diner, then finally landing a job at a construction company where I learned the ropes and proved myself. With every paycheck, with every small step forward, I could almost hear my parents' voices in the back of my mind, mocking me, doubting me. And every single time, I used that memory as fuel. Now, sitting here at 33, I look around at the life I've built, the home I own, the business I've started, the circle of friends who feel more like family than my own blood ever did. And I can't help but feel both pride and disbelief. I made it. I survived what should have broken me. And yet, life has a strange sense of humor. Because just when I thought I had left the past behind, my parents showed up at my door. It was a Tuesday evening when I heard the knock. A steady, almost hesitant knock that didn't match the delivery drivers or neighbors I was used to. When I opened the door, there they were. My father looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders hunched, his face lined with worry. My mother clutched her purse like it was the only thing tethering her to the ground. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, that some cruel twist of memory had conjured them up. But then my mother spoke, her voice trembling. "Ryan," she said, "we need your help." And that's when the old wounds I thought had healed suddenly began to ache again. I stood frozen in the doorway, the same doorway where I had greeted clients, friends, and neighbors with warmth countless times. But this wasn't the same. My father's eyes flicked around, not meeting mine, as if he was taking inventory of the house, the hardwood floors, the art on the walls, the simple but tasteful furniture I'd chosen. My mother, on the other hand, looked directly at me. She had the same sharp eyes I remembered, the same ones that used to narrow whenever she compared me to my sister. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Then she let out a sigh that was half pleading, half expectant. "Ryan, can we come in?" she asked. I hesitated, every instinct in me screaming no. I thought of all those nights in my car, shivering under a thin blanket, while behind the walls of their warm house they slept soundly without a thought for me. Still, something inside me, maybe politeness, maybe curiosity, shifted my weight to the side. "Fine," I said and stepped back. They entered like strangers, glancing around at a life they hadn't built, a life they had bet against. My dad cleared his throat. "You've done well for yourself," he muttered, like it was an accusation instead of a compliment. My mother nodded in agreement, but I could see the way her lips tightened. It wasn't pride. It was calculation. We sat down in the living room, and I waited. Finally, my mother broke the silence. "It's Emily," she said. "She's going through a difficult time." There it was. The name. My sister. The golden child. I leaned back in my chair, already bracing myself. "She's had some setbacks," my mother continued. "Her husband left, and she's struggling financially. She's not doing well emotionally either. We thought, well, you've done so well, Ryan. Maybe you could help her get back on her feet." I stared at them, trying to process the audacity. 15 years of silence, 15 years of pretending I didn't exist, and now here they were, not to apologize, not to reconnect, but to ask me to bail out the daughter they had chosen over me every single time. "What exactly are you asking?" I said slowly. My father finally spoke up. His tone was firm, as if this was already decided. "We were hoping you could lend her some money. A substantial amount. Enough so she can keep her house, maybe start over. She's your sister, after all." I laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "You locked me out on my 18th birthday, told me I was on my own, and now you want me to save Emily?" My mother frowned, as if I was being unreasonable. "That was years ago. We wanted you to learn responsibility. And look, it worked. You're successful now, aren't you? We gave you the push you needed." Her words hit me like ice water. She was rewriting history right in front of me. In her version, abandoning me wasn't cruelty. It was some kind of twisted gift. I leaned forward, my hands gripping my knees. "You didn't give me a push. You left me with nothing. I slept in my car. I scrubbed gas station floors at 3 in the morning. I built this life without you." My dad waved a hand dismissively. "The past is the past. Emily needs you now. We always knew you were stronger, that you could handle yourself. That's why we focused more on her. She was fragile. You were resilient." I could feel the old anger rising, the same anger that had kept me awake so many nights in that car. Resilient. That was their excuse. That I could handle being thrown away, while Emily got every ounce of care and comfort. "And what about me?" I asked quietly. "Who was there for me when I needed help?" My mother's eyes flickered, but she didn't answer. Instead, she said, "Ryan, don't be selfish. She's your family. She needs you." The word selfish stung. Selfish, after all I had endured, all I had clawed my way through. Selfish, because I wasn't eager to hand over the stability I had bled for. I thought back to birthdays spent alone, to holidays where no one called, to the countless times I had been reminded I was the expendable one. And now, after all that, they dared to sit in my living room and make me feel guilty for not opening my wallet. They weren't here for me. They weren't even here because they wanted to see me. They were here because Emily, the golden child, had fallen from her pedestal, and they needed someone to prop her back up. And in their minds, who better than the son they had once tossed aside like garbage? But as my mother's voice grew sharper, as my father's eyes grew more insistent, I realized something else. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. They wanted to reestablish the same dynamic as before. Me, the one who gives, who bends, who sacrifices, and Emily, the one who receives. The roles hadn't changed at all, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to play along. My father leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and lowered his voice like he was about to share something confidential. "Ryan," he said, "this isn't just about helping your sister. It's about doing what's right for the family. You've done well, and it's only fair that you share some of that with the people who raised you." I almost laughed at the word raised. Raised implied care, guidance, support. What they had done was closer to abandonment wrapped in a neat package of self-righteousness. But before I could respond, my mother reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of papers. She slid them across the coffee table toward me. "What's this?" I asked, though my chest was already tightening. "It's a loan agreement," she said smoothly. "We thought it would be easier for you to help Emily this way. We've already spoken to the bank. Well, technically we used your name, since you have better credit now. The loan's been approved. All you have to do is sign." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I picked up the papers and scanned the lines. Sure enough, my name was printed neatly across the top. The bank, the terms, the repayment schedule, everything had been set up without my knowledge. My parents hadn't just come to ask for help. They had already decided to entangle me in this mess, assuming I would have no choice but to agree. My voice cracked as I asked, You used my name?" My father nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. "We had to. Emily doesn't qualify, and you're in a much better position than she is. It's really no big deal. Just sign it, and she'll get the money she needs. You won't even feel it." The room tilted for a moment, my pulse thundering in my ears. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This wasn't just asking for help. This was betrayal on a level I hadn't imagined. They hadn't respected me enough to even ask first. They had gambled with my name, my reputation, my future, like it was theirs to control. "I can't believe this," I whispered. My mother's tone hardened, her mask of politeness slipping. "Ryan, stop being dramatic. We wouldn't even be here if it weren't urgent. Emily's going to lose her house. Do you really want your sister living on the streets? Is that what kind of man you've become?" I looked at her, stunned. "Do you even hear yourself? Your guilt tripping me into signing away my life because Emily messed up hers. You didn't care when I was sleeping in my car. You didn't care when I had nothing. But suddenly, when Emily's in trouble, you're desperate. She's your sister." My father snapped, his voice rising for the first time that night. "She deserves better. She's always been the one who carried this family's name with pride. You were reckless, always running off with your little ideas and dreams. If we had to choose who to support, of course it was her. And now that you're in a position to help, you're acting like a stranger." The words cut deeper than I expected. Even after all these years, hearing him admit so plainly that I had always been the expendable one twisted something inside me. All those times I had wondered if maybe I was imagining it, if maybe I just wasn't trying hard enough to win their approval. Those doubts shattered in an instant. They hadn't even seen me as worth investing in. I pushed the papers back toward them, my hands shaking. "No, I'm not signing this." My mother's face hardened. She leaned forward, her voice low but dripping with venom. "You think you're better than us now, don't you? Sitting in this nice house, pretending you built everything on your own. Don't forget where you came from, Ryan. Without us, you'd be nothing." The irony was almost laughable. Without them, I had been nothing. And that nothing had taught me to fight for everything I had now. But the betrayal sitting in front of me, the realization that even after 15 years, they hadn't changed, was almost too much to take in. And then, as if twisting the knife, my mother added, "If you won't do it for Emily, think of us. We've already tied our names to this loan. If you refuse, it'll look bad for the family. Do you want us to suffer? After all we've done for you." All they'd done for me. The words echoed in my mind, heavy with bitterness. They weren't just asking for help anymore. They were threatening me with shame, with reputation, with the idea of family that they had never once extended to me. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I realized there was no going back, no reconciliation, no quiet forgiveness waiting at the end of this story. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I leaned back in my chair, my voice steady now, almost calm. "So that's it. You come into my home, you use my name without asking, you demand I take on debt for Emily, and you think I'll just roll over like before." My father's jaw tightened. My mother's eyes narrowed. The silence between us grew heavier, like a storm building just before it breaks. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just about helping Emily. This was about showing them I wasn't the same broken kid they had left on the porch 15 years ago. The silence that followed my refusal was thick enough to choke on. My father's hand clenched into a fist on the armrest, his knuckles whitening. My mother leaned back, crossing her arms, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. For a moment, I wondered if they were going to shout, storm out, or even threaten something worse. But instead, my mother let out a long, tired sigh and said, "You'll regret this, Ryan. Family is everything. And when you turn your back on family, you turn your back on yourself." The words lingered in the air even after they left. They gathered their things, standing stiffly, and without another word, walked out of my house. I didn't follow them. I didn't even watch from the window. I sat in my chair long after the sound of their car had faded into the night, staring at the unsigned loan papers still lying on the table. For the first time in years, I felt like I was back in that car again. 18, alone, staring at the roof of my sedan while the cold crept into my bones. I thought I had outrun that version of myself, buried him under layers of success and independence. But now, with a few words and a stack of papers, my parents had managed to drag me right back into that old wound. The following days were heavy. I couldn't focus at work, my mind looping endlessly around what had happened. I kept asking myself questions I couldn't answer. Was I heartless for refusing? Was I selfish for not helping Emily? Was I really as cold as they claimed? Their voices played in my head like a cruel chorus. "You're selfish. You'll regret this. Without us, you'd be nothing." I tried to shake it off, but the weight clung to me. Nights were the worst again. I'd sit awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling that same ache of isolation I thought I had left behind. For years I had told myself their rejection didn't matter, that I was stronger without them. But their sudden reappearance, their demands, and that betrayal with the loan, those cracks in my armor widened faster than I expected. One morning, I found myself parked outside the old gas station where I'd worked all those years ago. I hadn't been there in a decade. The place hadn't changed much. The same faded sign, the same smell of fuel lingering in the air. I sat there in my car, gripping the steering wheel, remembering those long nights mopping floors and wondering if I'd ever make it out. It hit me then how close I had come to giving up back then, how fragile I had been beneath all that resilience my parents claimed I had. I realized that their betrayal hadn't just hurt. It had reopened scars I wasn't sure had ever fully healed. But underneath that pain, something else began to stir. A quieter voice. One that reminded me that I had survived once before, and I could survive this too. I didn't have to let them define me again. I didn't have to play their game. That night, I pulled the loan papers from the coffee table and read through them carefully, line by line. The more I read, the angrier I became. They had really gone this far, used my name, my credit, my reputation, without even asking. It wasn't just manipulation. It bordered on fraud. My parents weren't just asking for help. They were willing to risk destroying me to save Emily. I sat back, staring at the papers, my chest rising and falling slowly. The anger hadn't burned out yet, but it was shifting, hardening into something colder, something sharper. For the first time since that knock on my door, I started to think not about what they had done to me, but about what I could do in response. The thought scared me a little, if I'm honest. It felt dangerous, like stepping onto a path I couldn't turn back from. But it also felt necessary. If they were willing to gamble with my life for Emily's sake, then maybe it was time they finally learned what it felt like to be powerless. But I wasn't ready yet. Not fully. For now, I needed space. I needed to breathe. I needed to remind myself that I wasn't that scared 18-year-old kid anymore. So, I quietly folded the loan papers, slipped them into a drawer, and began to plan. The drawer with the loan papers became both a weight and a reminder. Every time I walked past it, I felt that simmering anger, but I also felt clarity. I had survived their abandonment. I had built a life from nothing, and now they had proven that nothing about them had changed. If I wanted to rise, it wasn't going to be for their approval. It was going to be for me. The weeks after their visit, I threw myself into work. I ran a contracting business by then, something I had started small, but had been growing steadily for years. We specialized in renovations and custom builds, and while business had always been good, I found myself more focused, more driven than ever. Every new project, every satisfied client, every check I signed for my employees, it all became part of a bigger picture. Success, I realized, wasn't just about money. It was about control. Control over my own life, my future, and most importantly, over the narrative that my parents had tried to write for me. Opportunities began to line up in ways they never had before. A developer I had done work for introduced me to a group of investors who were looking for someone to manage a series of commercial renovations. That contract alone doubled my company's annual revenue. Suddenly, I wasn't just a small business owner. I was building something that had reach, that had weight. With the extra income, I made changes in my personal life too. I upgraded my home, not out of vanity, but because I wanted a space that truly reflected what I had achieved. I traded in my old truck for a new one that I didn't have to pray over before every job. I even took my crew on a retreat as a thank you, watching their faces light up when they realized I valued them in a way my own parents had never valued me. Each step forward gave me more confidence, more leverage, and more distance from the boy who had once slept in his car. But it wasn't just financial growth. It was emotional growth too. I started opening up to people in ways I hadn't before. Friends became like family, the kind that showed up not because they wanted something, but because they cared. I even began mentoring a couple of younger guys in the trade, kids who reminded me of myself at 18, lost, unsure, written off by everyone around them. I told them the things I wished someone had told me back then. That resilience doesn't mean you deserve abandonment, and that success is never about proving someone else wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And yet, in the back of my mind, I knew my parents hadn't gone away. They had left my house empty-handed, but people like them didn't disappear quietly. They were waiting, watching, hoping I would cave, that I would eventually call and offer to help Emily. But with every new contract, every meeting with investors, every time I deposited another check into the business account, I felt stronger, more prepared. If they thought they could still pull strings on me, they were wrong. The shift became even clearer one night at a networking dinner. An investor introduced me as the man who built his business from scratch. The applause, the nods of respect, the handshake that followed. It all felt like validation I had never gotten from my parents. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. I didn't need their approval. I never had. But I also realized something else. Power wasn't just about protecting myself from them anymore. It was about positioning myself so that when they inevitably came back, and I knew they would, I'd be ready. Not as the boy who begged for scraps of affection, not as the man who quietly endured betrayal, but as someone who could finally look them in the eye and show them the cost of underestimating me. The rise wasn't just about building wealth. It was about building leverage. And deep down, I was beginning to sense that the moment to use it was getting closer. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to overhear. One afternoon, I stopped by a local supply yard to check on an order. As I was walking past the small office, I caught the tail end of a heated conversation, my mother's voice. I froze. She was standing outside, phone pressed to her ear, speaking with that sharp tone she always used when she was trying to sound in control. "No, I told you. We'll get the money. My son has more than enough. It's just a matter of convincing him. Emily cannot lose that house. Do you understand? If you foreclose, it will look bad for all of us." I ducked back behind a stack of pallets, my heart pounding. It hit me that this wasn't just about helping Emily out of some rough patch. She was on the brink of losing everything. And my parents weren't just worried about her. They were worried about appearances, about the family name. I waited until she left, then stepped into the office and casually asked the clerk who the woman had been. He shrugged and said, "Some lady arguing with the bank manager. Her daughter's mortgage is underwater." Not sure why she thought yelling would change that. The pieces began to click together in my mind. My parents hadn't just wanted me to help. They needed me to. Without my involvement, Emily was going to lose her home, and with it, the image they had spent decades protecting. The pedestal they'd always placed her on was cracking. And in their desperation, they had turned to the one person they once discarded. That realization was a turning point. For years, I had carried the weight of being the expendable one. But now, the roles had flipped. I wasn't the desperate one anymore. They were. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. They didn't just want me, they depended on me. And dependence, in the wrong hands, could be dangerous. Around that same time, an opportunity fell into my lap. The developer I had been working with offered me a chance to invest in a series of properties he was acquiring. It was risky, but the potential upside was huge. I ran the numbers, looked at the projections, and realized this was the moment I had been waiting for. If I played it right, not only could I grow my business, but I could secure a position of real influence in the community. I poured everything into the deal, late nights reviewing contracts, meetings with attorneys, careful negotiations with lenders. And when it finally closed, I found myself holding keys to properties that would generate steady income for years to come. I wasn't just running a contracting business anymore. I was becoming a landlord, an investor, a name that carried weight in circles my parents could only dream of entering. And that's when I started to think bigger. If Emily was truly at risk of losing her house, and if my parents were scrambling to maintain appearances, then there was an angle here. Something I could use. But I didn't want to rush. Revenge done in anger is sloppy. Revenge done with patience is art. So I waited. I built my reputation quietly, letting word spread about my success. I attended community meetings, shook hands with city officials, even sponsored a local charity event. People began to look at me differently, not just as a contractor, but as someone who mattered. One evening, while reviewing paperwork, I noticed something interesting. One of the properties I now held partial ownership in was just a few blocks away from Emily's house. It wasn't much, an older building in need of renovation, but the proximity was poetic. Our lives had once been separated by choice. My parents had chosen her over me. But now, fate was bringing us into the same orbit again. I couldn't ignore the symbolism. The more information I gathered, the more the pieces lined up. Emily's mortgage wasn't just shaky, it was teetering on the edge. My parents' pleas weren't just emotional, they were born out of panic. And me? I was no longer powerless. I had resources, influence, and, most importantly, the truth on my side. The truth that they needed me far more than I would ever need them. I didn't know exactly how I would use it yet, but I knew one thing for certain. The day was coming when I would. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A few weeks after overhearing my mother's call, I received a formal letter in the mail, an invitation to a family meeting. It was written in my mother's handwriting, though she tried to make it sound official, almost businesslike. "We need to discuss Emily's situation," it read. "It's important that you attend." I almost tossed it in the trash, but something in me stirred. This wasn't just another attempt to guilt me. It was them laying their desperation bare. If they were going to summon me like some reluctant benefactor, then I would show up. On my terms. The meeting was held at Emily's house, a two-story colonial that still bore the shine of being the family jewel. My parents had always paraded it around as proof of her success. I pulled up in my new truck, parked deliberately at the front where they couldn't miss it, and walked up to the door with steady steps. Inside, the tension was immediate. Emily sat on the couch, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. My father was pacing, his hands stuffed in his pockets. My mother sat rigidly, papers neatly stacked in front of her. They looked up as I entered, and for the first time in my life, I realized they were nervous. "Ryan," my mother said, forcing a smile. "Thank you for coming." I sat across from them, deliberately calm, and folded my hands in my lap. "You said it was important. So here I am." My father cleared his throat. "We've spoken with the bank. They're prepared to move forward with foreclosure unless we intervene. Emily needs immediate financial support. We were hoping you'd reconsider the loan." I leaned back, studying their faces. "You mean the loan you already tried to take out in my name?" My mother bristled. "We only did that because time was short. You should understand, Ryan, family sometimes requires sacrifice." I let the silence stretch, long enough that Emily shifted uncomfortably. Finally, I said, "You're right. Family does require sacrifice. I know that better than anyone." They exchanged hopeful glances, misinterpreting my calm. My father leaned forward. "So you'll help?" That's when I placed a folder on the table. Inside were copies of property deeds, financial statements, and business contracts, all tied to the new investments I had secured. My mother's eyes darted over the documents, confusion flickering across her face. "What's this?" she asked. "This," I said evenly, "is proof that I've built something real, something strong, something that doesn't need your approval. And it just so happens," I added, tapping one of the deeds, "that I now have influence in this community, more than you realize." My father frowned. "What does that have to do with Emily?" I looked directly at my sister. Her eyes were wide, a mix of fear and shame. "It means that when the bank decides what to do about your mortgage, whose voice do you think they'll listen to? The family that burned every bridge they ever had, or the man who now does business with their partners?" The room went silent. My mother's lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came out. My father stopped pacing, his face flushed. Emily looked down at her hands, trembling. I continued, my voice calm but firm. For 15 years, I was nothing to you. Disposable. A mistake. And now, suddenly, I'm the solution to all your problems. But here's the truth. You don't get to rewrite history. You don't get to decide when I matter. My mother finally found her voice. Ryan, you can't mean to let your sister lose everything. That would be cruel. Cruel? I repeated, almost laughing. Cruel was turning an 18-year-old out into the cold without a second thought. Cruel was watching me sleep in my car while you celebrated holidays without me. Cruel was using my name to secure a loan behind my back. I leaned in, lowering my voice to a near whisper. No, cruel would be me pretending this is my problem to solve. Cruel would be giving you exactly what you want and letting you think you still have power over me. Their faces were pale now, the weight of my words settling in. I stood, tucking the folder back under my arm. I came here to show you one thing, I said. You don't hold the cards anymore. I do, and I won't be signing anything for you. I walked toward the door, their voices calling after me, pleading, bargaining, even threatening, but I didn't turn back. With each step, I felt lighter, stronger, more certain that I had finally broken free of their hold. But as I reached my truck, a thought crossed my mind. Maybe simply saying no wasn't enough. Maybe the real revenge wasn't just in refusing their demands. It was in letting them feel the slow, inevitable crumble of the world they had built on favoritism and lies. And for the first time, I started to plan not just how to protect myself, but how to make sure they finally understood the cost of underestimating me. I didn't hear from them for a few weeks after the meeting. The silence was almost surreal, like standing in the eye of a storm that had finally passed. But storms have a way of circling back, and this one did. It started with whispers around town, at the supply yard, at the diner, even during a city council meeting I attended. People mentioned Emily's name with pity. Word had spread fast. Her house was officially in foreclosure. She had 30 days to vacate. I didn't gloat when I heard it, but I won't lie. It stirred something inside me. Not joy, exactly, but a sense of inevitability. The pedestal my parents had built for her was crumbling in full view of everyone who used to admire it. A week later, I saw them again. I was walking out of the bank after finalizing paperwork for a new investment property when I spotted my parents and Emily in the lobby. They looked like shadows of themselves, tired, frayed, the confident edge gone from their voices. My father muttered something to the teller, who shook her head with professional sympathy. My mother clutched a stack of documents like they might disappear if she let go. Emily stood behind them, eyes downcast, avoiding everyone's gaze. They noticed me. For a second, hope flickered in their faces. My mother even started toward me, lips parting like she was about to say my name. But I didn't stop. I walked past them, my stride steady, my head high. As the glass doors closed behind me, I caught a glimpse of them through the reflection. 3 figures left standing in a building where they no longer had leverage, watching the son they had once discarded move forward without them. The fallout grew worse for them in the weeks that followed. Emily's house was auctioned off, the bank repossessed her car, and the perfect daughter image shattered beyond repair. My parents' friends, the same people they had always bragged to about Emily's accomplishments, started keeping their distance. The invitations to social gatherings dried up. Their pride, which had always been their shield, turned into their greatest liability. Meanwhile, my life kept climbing. The properties I had invested in turned profitable quicker than expected, and my company landed 2 new contracts that cemented my reputation even further. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving on a level my parents could never ignore, even from the sidelines. One evening, I returned home from work to find a letter in my mailbox. The handwriting was shaky, but familiar. My mother. Inside, she wrote a single page, filled with apologies that felt more desperate than sincere. At the end, she wrote, "Please, Ryan, don't let us fade from your life completely. We're still your parents." I set the letter down on the table and stared at it for a long time. A part of me, the boy who once longed for their love, felt the pull to forgive. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. And forgetting would mean erasing the nights in the car, the years of silence, the betrayal with the loan papers. So I didn't reply. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in the same drawer where I had once kept the fraudulent loan documents. A reminder, not of pain, but of clarity. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by loyalty, by love, by the people who stand by you when you have nothing to offer. My parents had made their choice 15 years ago. I was simply living with the consequences, and so were they. As I sat back in my chair that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Closure. Not because I had hurt them, but because I had finally freed myself from their hold. The final line they had given me at 18 echoed in my mind. You're on your own now. And for the first time, I smiled, because it was true. I was on my own, and I was better for it. My name is Kale. I'm 31, and if there's one thing I've learned from being the middle child of a family that worships appearances, it's that being invisible doesn't mean you're forgotten. It just means they're pretending you don't exist until they need something. For years, I played the part of the agreeable one, not because I lacked a spine, but because standing your ground in a family like mine meant setting off a series of small emotional grenades no one wanted to deal with. My older sister, Bree, was always the star, the one with the perfect Instagram life, the Pinterest boards for every holiday, and a sense of entitlement so polished you could see your reflection in it. And my mom? Let's just say she ran PR for Bree like it was her full-time job. Me? I was the quiet one. The one who worked behind the scenes, the one they called when someone's car broke down or when a deposit needed topping up just until payday. So when Bree got engaged, I kept my expectations low. I sent a congratulatory text, offered to help if needed, and otherwise stayed in my lane. I didn't expect to be asked to be part of the wedding party, didn't expect any special recognition. God forbid I upstage her with my very average presence. But I did assume, foolishly, that I'd at least be treated like family. Especially considering I'd been quietly funding things here and there over the past year, helping Mom pay her half of the engagement party venue when Bree accidentally forgot the invoice, covering the florist deposit when Dad's card got declined, even floating Bree a few $100 when she miscalculated her dress budget. I never made a show of it, never asked for thanks, but I did think it bought me at least one seat. Just one. The wedding day arrived with the kind of suffocating perfection only Bree could pull off. Every detail screamed curated elegance. The rustic vineyard venue with the vintage lanterns, the gold-foiled menus, the hand-painted signs reminding everyone to cherish this moment. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in the navy suit Bree had once told me wasn't too distracting, holding a simple card with an envelope inside, my gift, a sizable financial one, since I knew they were eyeing an expensive honeymoon package in Italy. It was my way of saying, I support you, even if I don't matter much to you. As I approached the check-in table, I gave my name, expecting the usual nod and direction. Instead, the young girl flipping through the guest list squinted, frowned, and said, I don't see a Kale listed here. Are you sure you're not someone's plus one? I blinked, then gave her my last name. Still nothing. A man beside her leaned over, checked the printed sheet, and said, Sorry, sir. Maybe try the overflow table? Overflow? Confused, I walked toward the reception area, scanning the beautifully arranged tables with their ivory centerpieces and gold-rimmed glassware. Each place setting had a name, and I didn't see mine anywhere. I spotted my cousin Ava, who waved me over awkwardly, then leaned in with a sympathetic smile. Kale, I think you're by the back. Like, near the bathrooms. I don't know why, they said they were tight on space. Tight on space. Right. Except I saw Bree's high school friend, who she hadn't spoken to in a decade, sitting front and center, laughing with my aunt. And then I saw him. My ex Micah. The same man who ghosted me after 2 years together, who just so happened to now be Bree's best friend's roommate. He was in the front row, wearing a tailored suit and smiling like he belonged there. And I, apparently, didn't. I stood frozen, staring, until I felt a gentle hand on my arm. My mother, dressed in a pale blush gown, her makeup immaculate, not a hair out of place. She looked at me like someone who just spotted a stain on her favorite dress. Kale, she said, voice low and clipped. I didn't know you'd actually come. I RSVP'd, I replied, confused and trying not to let my voice crack. She smiled, one of those brittle, polite ones that never reach the eyes. We just weren't sure. You know how you were with gatherings. And, well, Bree worked so hard to curate a certain aesthetic. You understand, right? Aesthetic. That word echoed in my head like a slap. I turned to look again. My seat was there, next to the swinging door that led to the restrooms. A single folding chair, metal, no name tag, not even a centerpiece. Just a plain white napkin. The humiliation burned through me like acid. I looked down at the envelope in my hand, the one with the check inside. A generous one. Something I knew would have helped them afford those beachfront suites Bree kept gushing about. I wanted to leave. I should have just left. But then I remembered every time I'd swallowed my pride so they wouldn't have to feel awkward. Every joke at my expense brushed off as just teasing. Every quiet withdrawal from my account to cover someone else's mess. Every time my parents forgot my birthday but made a production of Bree's. And I knew I wasn't going to walk away quietly this time. With a calm I didn't quite feel, I walked down the center of the venue, past the laughing guests and the string quartet playing some classical piece I didn't recognize. I reached the head table. Bree turned, all glowing skin and pinback curls, mid-laugh. When she saw me, her smile faltered. I held her gaze. I could feel the silence ripple around me, the way people instinctively sense something off. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the envelope, and placed it gently on the table in front of her. Then, just loud enough for everyone to hear, I said, "You can pay for your own honeymoon now." Her mouth dropped open. A few heads turned. I saw Micah shift uncomfortably in his seat. My mother's face drained of color. But I didn't wait for a reply. I turned on my heel and walked toward the exit. I didn't look back as I walked past the photo booth, past the perfectly arranged macarons, past the welcome sign that read Bree and Callum, a love story written in the stars. All I heard behind me was the growing murmur of confusion, clinks of forks pausing mid-bite, chairs creaking as people leaned in, whispers breaking through the forced cheer. I reached my car with my pulse pounding in my ears and sat there for a moment, staring at the steering wheel, hands trembling not with regret, but with the aftershock of years' worth of swallowed indignities finally bursting free. I didn't cry. Not right away. But when I turned the key in the ignition, the tears came and not out of sadness, but a deep, aching exhaustion. Like my soul had been carrying a weight for too long, and I'd finally set it down. I drove home in silence, ignoring the flurry of messages that lit up my phone within 10 minutes of leaving. First, a text from Leo, my brother. "Dude, what is going on?" Then from my aunt. "You okay?" That was unexpected. Then a call from Mom, which I let go to voicemail. Then another. And another. I finally turned my phone off when Bree's name popped up on the screen. I knew exactly what that call was going to be. Not an apology. Not an attempt to understand. Just damage control. When I woke up the next morning, it was like a dam had broken overnight. 37 unread messages. 4 voicemails. Even an email from Bree titled, "Unbelievable." I opened it against my better judgment. "Kale, I don't even know where to begin." I tried to be gracious. "I didn't even make a scene when you just showed up even though you weren't confirmed. And then you embarrassed me in front of everyone? During the head table toast?" I was crying in the bridal suite for an hour while Callum tried to calm me down. "Mom said you were probably just feeling left out. But honestly, you should be ashamed. We had a vision. We had a theme. You know how important that day was for me. And you made it about you. Please send the check when you've calmed down. We already booked the hotel and can't get a refund." Bree, that last line. Please send the check. As if my boundary was just a tantrum. As if my pain could be placated with a delayed donation. I stared at the email for a while, trying to decide whether I was more angry or amazed at the gall. Eventually, I just closed my laptop and went about my day. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because the real unraveling hadn't even started yet. 2 days later, I got a call from Callum's older sister, Jasmine. We'd only met once, briefly, at a family barbecue, but she remembered me. She said she hoped it wasn't too weird to call, but she just wanted to ask me something. "Did you really not have a seat?" she asked softly. Because that's not what Bree's telling people. I told her the truth. Every detail. The folding chair, the non-existent name card, the aesthetic comment, the way my ex had a better seat than I did, the way my mother pretended like it was perfectly normal. There was a long pause, and then she exhaled. That actually explains a lot. Apparently, Callum's family had noticed strange things too. Guests who were bumped last minute, people who were told their plus ones couldn't come due to space, and Callum's grandfather, who uses a wheelchair, being seated at the very end of a long table where no one helped him navigate. "And Callum was livid when you left," Jasmine added. "He had no idea." I didn't know how to respond to that. Livid? At me? Or at Bree? It didn't matter much, because the fallout kept spiraling. My cousin Ava texted me later that night with a blurry photo of the seating chart she'd snapped on her phone. My name was nowhere on it, but Micah's was. In block letters. Front table, left side. "Did she invite him instead of you?" Ava wrote. "Because it kinda looks like it." Then came the Facebook posts. Bree had started uploading the wedding album, curated highlights only, of course. Except people noticed I wasn't in a single picture. Not the group photo, not the ceremony, not even candid crowd shots. That's when the comments started trickling in. Polite at first. Did Kale not make it? Where's your brother? Then slightly more pointed. Heard something happened at the wedding. Hope everything's okay. That's when Bree took down the entire album. Just wiped it. No explanation. 3 days after the wedding, my mother showed up at my apartment. No warning. Just knocked like she used to when I was in college and missed dinner again. She was holding a pink bakery box, lemon bars. My favorite. I didn't open the door. Kale, honey, she said through the door, can we talk? I stayed quiet. You embarrassed your sister. Still quiet. You know I hate when things escalate like this. Eventually, she left the box on my doorstep and walked away. I watched from the peephole, heart pounding, hands curled into fists. Not out of rage, just this deep ache. Like I'd spent my whole life hoping for something soft from her, something real. And all she had were baked goods and guilt trips. The lemon bars went straight into the trash. By the end of the week, I had heard from nearly every extended family member. Some were neutral, curious, cautious. Others were outraged on Bree's behalf. But a few quietly admitted they'd seen this pattern too. That I wasn't crazy. That this wasn't just one bad day, it was years of being the convenient one, the background character in a drama I was never allowed to star in. I started getting invitations to coffee. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanted to catch up. An uncle offered to reimburse me for part of the wedding gift I'd almost given. And then, most surprisingly of all, I got a text from Callum. Hey Kale, can we talk? I let the message from Callum sit for almost 2 days. It wasn't out of spite. I just didn't know what I wanted from that conversation. Part of me was still raw, still processing the realization that I had been deliberately excluded, not just forgotten. Another part was afraid that whatever he had to say would be some carefully worded plea to keep quiet and let everything die down for the sake of Bree's public image. She was obsessed with optics, and I just tossed a Molotov cocktail into her curated narrative. But then I thought back to what Jasmine had said, how Callum had been livid, how he'd supposedly had no idea. That didn't match the person Bree always painted him to be. So finally, I replied, I'll talk, but not on the phone. We met at a quiet little cafe downtown, one of those indie places with mismatched mugs and lopsided shelves of books no one ever reads. I got there early, chose a table in the corner, and waited with a growing pit in my stomach. When he walked in, he looked tired, not groomed to perfection the way he was in the wedding photos. He saw me, offered a small wave, and slid into the seat across from me. Thanks for coming, he said, voice low. I didn't answer right away. I just watched him, waiting. He exhaled through his nose. I want to start by saying I'm sorry. I didn't know. About the seating. About the guest list. About Micah. Any of it. That last one hit me harder than I expected. You didn't know Micah was invited? I asked, skeptical. No, he said firmly. Bree told me you weren't coming. She said you didn't RSVP. That you had a weird thing about weddings and big social events. I almost laughed. It sounded exactly like something Bree would say, just enough truth to sound plausible, just enough distance to avoid direct blame. I RSVP'd through the website, I said flatly. Weeks ago. Callum ran a hand down his face, looking exhausted. She handled all the planning herself. I should have paid more attention, but everything happened so fast. I didn't say anything. Let the silence do the heavy lifting. He finally looked up. She lied to me, Kale. And not just about you. About a lot of things. I'm still piecing things together. I studied him. There was something in his eyes, regret, yes, but also that slow, dawning awareness you see in people when they realize they married a mask and are only now starting to see the face beneath it. I don't know if it's my place, I said after a moment, but you might want to check the receipts for that honeymoon. Because I know for a fact my mom said you two couldn't afford the upgrade. That's why I was giving the check. Not out of obligation, but because I believed she loved you. He nodded slowly. She told me it was covered by her parents. That they wanted to gift us the upgrade as a surprise. I blinked. They didn't, I said. He swallowed hard. I figured. We sat in silence for a while, the noise of the cafe drifting around us like background static. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice barely above a whisper. Can I ask you something? I nodded. Why didn't you just leave? His eyes searched mine. When you saw your seat, when they said those things, why didn't you just walk away? I stared down at my untouched drink for a moment, then back at him. Because I've been walking away my whole life, I said. Every time they made me feel like I was too much or not enough. Every time I was the family joke or the errand boy or the backup plan. I walked away quietly so they wouldn't feel bad. But this time, they embarrassed me on purpose, publicly. And I wanted them to know, really know, that I wasn't going to let it slide anymore. Callum nodded slowly, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. She told me to give this to you, he said. After she found out we were meeting, I didn't take it. I'm guessing it's not an apology, I muttered. He gave a humorless chuckle. No, well, she's asking you not to talk about this. To anyone. Says it's hurting her reputation. Oh, I said. The truth's inconvenient. He nodded again, and this time there was a flicker of something stronger in his face, anger, maybe. Or shame. I didn't know who I married, he admitted. I leaned back. You might have married the version she sells to the world. We all did, in our own way. We didn't talk much more after that. He paid for the drinks, thanked me for meeting him, and left with a quiet, heavy step. The next few days were weird. Calmer in some ways, but with an eerie tension simmering under the surface. Bree hadn't contacted me directly, but her orbit had. A friend of hers messaged me on Instagram, passive-aggressively calling me dramatic and telling me real family doesn't blow up weddings over one chair. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Because the tide was turning. Aunt Mara, one of the more outspoken voices in the family, called me and said, I looked at that photo you were in. The one from the party last year. You were sitting in the back then too. I just didn't see it at the time. Her voice cracked a little. None of you did, I said gently. Because I never made it a problem. There was a pause. I'm sorry, Kale. The next day, she posted a photo on Facebook. Not from the wedding, but from a family reunion a few years ago. A candid one. Me holding my niece, smiling softly while everyone else was crowding around Bree. Her caption just read, sometimes the quietest ones are the ones holding everything together. That post got more likes than all of Bree's wedding photos combined. Later that week, I got a text from my mother. We need to talk. You've made things very difficult. I waited a full day before even opening that text from my mother. Not because I didn't see it, but because I wanted to sit with the feeling it gave me. That familiar cocktail of obligation, guilt, and quiet rage. You've made things very difficult. Not let's talk. Not I'm sorry. Not help me understand. Just a sentence that placed the blame, once again, squarely on me. I finally opened it on a rainy Thursday evening, curled up on my couch, listening to the patter of rain hit the window like an old metronome keeping time with my thoughts. I stared at the message for a few long seconds, then set my phone face down on the coffee table. I didn't reply. Not then. Not the next day. Not at all. And that silence, the one I used to fill with apologies, favors, or last-minute rescues, grew louder by the hour. I think that's when things really started to unravel. It began quietly. Missed calls, group chat silence, a couple of passive-aggressive posts on Facebook from one of Bree's bridesmaids about loyalty and family drama ruining weddings. I didn't engage. Neither did most of the family. But then I started getting messages, real ones, from people I hadn't heard from in months, sometimes years. Cousins, aunts, even old friends of Bree's. One cousin, Jules, messaged me late one night. Just wanted to say you weren't wrong. I remember when Bree uninvited me from her birthday dinner because my dress was the wrong shade of mauve. I thought I was being petty for still remembering, but now I get it. Another sent me a picture from Bree's wedding, a candid someone else had taken, blurry and unflattering. It showed me standing near the restroom hallway, holding my coat in one hand, the envelope in the other. Alone. Forgotten. Background noise. This one hit different after I heard the full story. The message read, she didn't even tell us you were there. By the time a week had passed, Bree had gone radio silent. No more social media posts. No updated honeymoon photos. Just a single, now deleted Instagram story that had featured a filtered beach pic with the caption, some people are determined to be the villain in your happiness. It backfired. The comments weren't what she'd hoped for. You mean your brother who paid for half your wedding and sat by the bathroom? Villains don't usually give $3,000 checks. Just saying. So is your aesthetic just excluding people who don't fit your brand? I didn't write any of those comments. I didn't have to. People were connecting the dots on their own. Then came the real blow. Jasmine texted me on a Monday afternoon. Callum moved out. He's staying with me. I sat there, stunned. I hadn't spoken to Callum since our coffee meeting, Hadn't expected anything more than quiet regret on his part. But apparently, quiet regret had evolved into a full-blown confrontation. He found out Bree lied about more than just you. She opened a second credit card in his name to cover the extra touches for the wedding. Said she'd take care of it later. He only found out when the bill arrived. He says he doesn't even recognize her anymore. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just someone who had been excluded. I was someone whose absence had become a catalyst. A crack in the porcelain facade Bree had spent her whole adult life perfecting. And now the pieces were beginning to fall. It took another 3 weeks for my mother to reach out again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a knock at the door. I almost didn't answer. But something told me it was time to let this play out. I opened the door, and there she was, makeup immaculate, but her eyes tired. She looked at me like someone bracing for a storm. "Kale," she said softly. I stepped aside. Let her in. She sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, holding her purse like it was a lifeline. "I came to talk," she said. "Really talk. Not deflect. Not defend." I sat across from her, silent. She took a breath. I didn't see it. I really didn't. I thought we were protecting Bree. That she needed more. That you were fine. That made me laugh, bitter and low. Because I didn't complain? She looked down. "Yes. I wasn't fine," I said. "But it was easier for everyone if I acted like I was. So I did." She nodded slowly, her fingers twisting the strap of her purse. "I didn't mean to make you feel small. But you did," I said. Over and over. "And not just you. Bree. Dad. The whole family. I was useful. Quiet. Disposable." There was a long silence. She didn't deny it. Didn't argue. That was new. "Your father and I," she started, then stopped. "We got so used to Bree's intensity. Her expectations. Her flare-ups. It was easier to manage her than to challenge her. You were easier to overlook." I blinked. That wasn't an apology, but it was close. She looked up at me. "Kale, what can I do now?" I thought about it for a long moment. "You can stop asking me to fix everything," I said. "You can start telling the truth. To yourself. To others. You can stop pretending Bree is the victim here." My mother sat quietly, then nodded. "I can do that." She left not long after. No hug. No parting lemon bars. Just a quiet, measured goodbye. I didn't expect much to change after that. But it did. A few days later, a family group chat popped up on my phone. One that Bree wasn't in. It was started by Leo, of all people, who'd previously kept his head down during all the drama. The first message surprised me. "We need to do better." Starting with Kale. "I'm sorry, bro." Messages followed from others. Apologies, memories, even offers to get together. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an accessory to someone else's story. And Bree? She stayed quiet. Rumors swirled. Callum had officially filed for an annulment. Her influencer friends stopped tagging her in photos. She locked her Instagram. Even my mother, when I last saw her, said Bree hadn't returned her calls in over a week. I don't know what Bree's next move will be. And honestly, I don't care. I spent so long thinking that family meant shrinking yourself to make room for others. That love was endurance. That silence was peace. Not anymore. I didn't become bitter. I became free. And if that makes me the villain in someone else's fairy tale, so be it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm 46, and my name's Mark. I'm the kind of dad who never made a fuss, never stood in the way, never made Father's Day about me. I'm the ex-husband who didn't drag out the divorce, who didn't badmouth the new guy, who quietly stepped back when my son's mom remarried, and her new husband started showing up to school events and parent-teacher nights like he'd been there all along. I never wanted to be the kind of man who turned his kid into a battlefield. So I paid my part, and then some, without keeping score. For the last 2 years, I've been covering my son Ryan's tuition. $2,000 a month, direct wire, paid in full to the university bursar's office from a separate account. No questions asked. He never even knew it was me. His mother had convinced me it would be easier for him that way, that it would avoid emotional confusion. She said letting him believe the tuition came from her and her husband would help him feel more secure. Stable, she called it. I didn't want to mess with that. I just wanted my son to succeed. So I said yes, like I always do. Ryan just finished his sophomore year. He's 19 now. Bright kid, sharp, good with numbers, better with people. He wants to go into finance, or at least he used to. We don't talk as much as we used to. Our conversations have become more polite, brief, measured. Like he's not sure how to act around me anymore. like he's afraid he might be betraying someone else by being too warm with me. I chalked it up to adolescence and time apart. I figured he'd come around. That someday, the quiet consistency would matter more than the dramatic gestures. I never bought him cars or flew him to Cancun like his stepfather did. But I showed up. I always showed up. Which is why Father's Day this year hit me harder than I expected. It was one of those humid June Sundays, sun blazing just a little too harshly on the front lawns and grilling dads everywhere. I texted Ryan the day before to see if he wanted to grab lunch. He told me they had plans as a family, but maybe we could do something later in the week. I understood. At least, I thought I did. That's what I told myself when I took the afternoon to clean the garage and listen to an old Cubs game on the radio just to keep the silence from feeling too loud. Around 4 p.m., I got a message from an old neighbor, Mrs. Cole, sweet lady, lives 3 houses down from my ex-wife and her husband. She sent me a video. Thought you might want to see this, she wrote, with one of those awkward smiley emojis older folks use when they're not sure if it softens the blow. It was a clip from their backyard. A Father's Day barbecue. Everyone looked happy. There was my ex laughing over a pitcher of sangria. Her husband, Tim, loud, tan, and always wearing those fitted polos, stood at the center of attention, flipping burgers like some suburban king. Ryan stepped forward, holding a small box. I turned up the volume. My hands were already shaking. Here, he said, I got you this. Tim opened it. A Rolex. Real or fake? I couldn't tell. Didn't matter. The crowd gasped. Ryan grinned and said, "You've always been more of a dad than he ever was." And then everyone laughed. They laughed. I don't remember watching the rest of the clip. I don't even remember putting down my phone. I just sat there for a while, feeling like my chest had been hollowed out. I thought about the calls I'd made to financial aid officers, the bills I'd silently paid, the groceries I used to drop off when his mom said money was tight. I thought about the homemade cards from when he was little, the bedtime stories, the late-night drives to pick him up from school when he forgot his backpack or missed the bus. And somehow, all of that felt like it had evaporated in the space of one sentence. One sentence and a watch. I didn't cry. Not yet. I don't know if it was rage or heartbreak, but something snapped. I opened my laptop and pulled up the tuition account. 2 clicks. Cancel automatic payments. 1 more click. Notify University of sponsor withdrawal. I didn't even leave a note. Just hit confirm and close the screen. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't disappearing quietly into the background. Monday went by in a blur. Tuesday too. I figured someone would say something. I expected a text, maybe from my ex, something passive-aggressive, something that danced around the issue. But nothing came. Not until this morning. My phone started buzzing at 7:43 a.m., waking me up before my alarm. Ryan. I ignored the first call. Then came the second. And the third. By the fourth, I picked up, heart pounding in a way I hadn't felt in years. His voice was shaky. "Dad, what did you do?" I blinked, still groggy. "What do you mean?" "The university said my tuition payment stopped. They said the sponsor canceled. I'm not enrolled for next semester. They said I'd have to reapply for aid or pay out of pocket before Friday, or I'm dropped from all my courses." Did you cancel it? Why would you do that?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted to scream, but my voice came out calm. Too calm. "I saw the video, Ryan." Silence. Then a soft, hesitant, "What video?" "The one where you gave Tim a watch and told him he's more of a dad than I ever was." He didn't speak. I could hear him breathing on the other end. Panicked. Processing. "I never wanted recognition," I said. "I just wanted you to succeed. But maybe it's time the man who raised you so well picked up the tab, too." "Dad, please," he said, his voice cracking. I didn't mean it like that. It was a joke. Everyone was laughing. I didn't think. No, I cut in. "You didn't." And then I hung up. That was an hour ago. Now I'm sitting here, coffee going cold in my hands, watching my phone buzz every few minutes with new messages. Some from Ryan. Some from his mother. One from Tim, of all people, asking if I could act like an adult and not take things out on my son. That one almost made me laugh. Almost. I haven't responded yet. But I will. Just not yet. Because for once, I want them to sit with the silence. To feel what I've felt. Every birthday missed. Every memory rewritten. Every thank you swallowed. I want them to realize that not all wounds leave scars on the outside. And not all fathers wear watches. And that's when the doorbell rings. I check the camera. It's Ryan. Standing on my porch. Face pale. Eyes wide. Hands shaking. but I don't move. Not yet. He stood there for a while, glancing down at his phone, then up at the doorbell camera, then back at his phone like he wasn't sure what he was supposed to say, or maybe like he was rehearsing it all in his head. I could tell he wanted to knock but didn't. Just stood there, fidgeting with the sleeves of his hoodie. That same gray one he wore all the time in high school. I hadn't seen it in years. He looked smaller in it now, like the weight of everything was finally starting to settle. I let him wait. Not out of spite, at least, not entirely. But because I needed the moment. I needed him to need it. For once, I wasn't going to chase him down or make it easier. Let him stand in the silence. Let him earn his way in. After 7 minutes, yes, I watched the clock. I opened the door. "Hey," he said softly. I didn't respond. Just leaned against the frame, arms crossed. He cleared his throat. Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, like the living room was unfamiliar territory. Like he didn't know where to sit anymore. He hovered near the couch but didn't sit. Just stood with his hands deep in his hoodie pockets and his eyes fixed on the floor. "I messed up," he said. "I know that." I stayed quiet. Let him keep going. I didn't mean what I said at the party. Not really. It was loud, and people were watching, and I thought it would make Tim feel good. And everyone laughed, so I thought. "I don't know. I wasn't thinking about you." I looked at him, searching his face for sincerity. Not guilt. Not panic. Truth. "You didn't think about me," I repeated. He looked up. "No. And that's the worst part. You've done everything for me. You were there when Mom wasn't. When Tim wasn't. When no one was. But you didn't say that," I said, keeping my tone flat. "You said he was more of a dad than I ever was." He winced. "I know." There was a long pause. He sat down on the edge of the couch, like he didn't feel he had permission to sink in. And maybe he didn't. Not yet. They told me the university's going to cancel everything. My schedule, my housing, my scholarship interviews. I can't get new aid in time, and Mom said they can't afford the payments right now. Tim said maybe I should take a semester off. But that means I lose my spot. I raised my eyebrows. And he blinked. And I'm scared. I worked hard for this. I've done everything I was supposed to. I tilted my head slightly. "Except remember who helped you get there." He swallowed hard. "I didn't forget. I guess I took it for granted." That word, granted. Like all those nights I stayed up late going over loan paperwork, or those early mornings taking freelance projects just to keep that tuition fund full, were some inevitable given. Like fathers are supposed to be invisible benefactors. Quiet hands that sign checks but never need to be seen. I let the silence stretch. Then I asked, "What do you think it means to be a father?" He looked confused for a second. I guess, being there. Providing. Protecting. Teaching. Loving. Even when you're ignored?" He nodded. "Even when someone else gets the credit?" He hesitated, then nodded again. "Yeah." I leaned forward, resting my forearms on my knees. That's what I did. For 19 years. And I never asked for praise. Never asked for gifts. I just wanted to be your dad. Not your friend. Not your ATM. Just your dad. But I needed to believe it meant something. Even if you didn't say it out loud. Even if it was just a look or a thanks now and then. I needed to know I wasn't invisible. His face cracked then. Like something inside him finally gave way. "I'm sorry, Dad. I really am. I messed up. I messed everything up." Tears welled in his eyes. Real ones. Not panic over tuition. Not fear of losing school. But shame. Regret. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this. Last night. After you hung up." He handed it to me with shaking hands. I opened it slowly. It was a letter. Handwritten. The first line said, "To the man I owe more than I can ever repay." I didn't read the rest aloud. I didn't need to. The gesture was enough for now. I folded it gently and set it on the coffee table. "Do you think an apology fixes everything?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Work off the tuition. Help out. Be there. Just, please don't walk away from me." I stared at him for a long time. Let him sit in that vulnerability. Then, finally, I said, "It's not about the money, Ryan. It never was. It's about knowing I matter." "You do," he said, without hesitation. I believed him, but I wasn't ready to make it easy. "Go home," I said. "Let me think." He looked disappointed but nodded. "Okay." He stood, hesitated again, then reached out and hugged me. I didn't hug him back. Not yet. But I didn't pull away either. After he left, I picked up the letter and read every word. The whole thing. Then I sat there in the quiet, heart pounding. Because now I had a choice to make. One that wasn't about money or revenge, but about whether a father's love should ever come with a price. And right as I was about to make up my mind, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was from my ex. And her message? Mark, we need to talk. Now. I stared at the screen, and then everything changed. I didn't respond right away. For a second, I just stared at the message. The nerve. We need to talk? After 2 years of letting me be the invisible hand writing the checks? After her backyard wine and laughs show where I got reduced to a punchline? I locked my phone and set it face down. But of course, it buzzed again. And again. Then a third time. This time a call. I watched her name flash on the screen for a moment. Then I answered. Mark, she said before I could get a word in, her voice tight and controlled. Too controlled. I just found out what you did. You canceled Ryan's tuition? I didn't answer immediately. I let her words hang there, suspended in the air between us like a courtroom charge. She pressed again. He's panicking. He's talking about dropping out. Why didn't you tell us you were planning to stop paying? I didn't plan to stop, I said evenly. I planned to keep paying. Right up until I watched that little video of yours. There was a pause, sharp, tense. She tried to recover. That wasn't about you, Mark. You're overreacting. You're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. I almost laughed. A bigger deal? My son told another man, in front of your entire family, that I was never really his dad. That I was just some distant afterthought. And you think the issue is me making a big deal? She sighed. One of those drawn out, exasperated sighs that always meant I'm done pretending I care what you think. Look, she said, Tim's been here every day for years. He shows up. He's a good stepfather. Ryan was trying to show appreciation. You weren't even invited to the barbecue. Exactly, I cut in. Because you made sure I wouldn't be. Her voice changed then. Lowered. Defensive. You chose your distance, Mark. You always wanted it quiet. Hands off. You didn't want to be the every weekend dad. You said so yourself. I didn't want to compete, I replied. That's different. I didn't want Ryan stuck in a loyalty tug of war. So I backed off, paid my part, and hoped that eventually, I'd still have a place in his life that mattered. You do matter, she said, but her tone sounded thin now, like she didn't quite believe it. I let a beat pass. Then why lie about the tuition? Silence. Why let him believe you were paying it? Why not just tell him the truth? You and Tim have enough money to throw backyard parties with Rolexes, but you still let me cover the school bills? That's not just insulting. That's calculated. Finally, she said the quiet part out loud. Because you're better at that stuff. The money stuff. Tim doesn't like to. He thinks college should be Ryan's responsibility. He offered to help if Ryan needed it, but not like you. You've always been more consistent. More willing to be invisible, I said, the words hitting harder than I expected. She didn't reply. Then I heard her voice change again, this time with a sharper edge. So what now? Are you going to punish Ryan because you're hurt? Are you really willing to ruin his future over a dumb comment? My jaw clenched. No, I said slowly. But I am done being used. There was another pause. This one longer. Then came the real reason she'd called. Well, what would it take for you to reinstate the payments? I felt something turn in my stomach. There it is. The transactional offer. Not, let's talk as co-parents. Not, I understand how you feel. Just straight to the bartering. Like I was some grumpy shareholder they needed to appease. I don't think you understand, I said. This isn't about the money. Not anymore. But it's your son, Mark. I let those words sit. And then, without meaning to, I whispered, you never let him be mine. Not really. She tried again, more impatient now. So what? Are you just gonna watch him lose his education? Are you seriously okay with that? I didn't answer. Because truthfully, I didn't know. I didn't know what I wanted more, vindication or reconciliation. I just knew I was tired of being the only one who cared quietly. I need time, I said finally. And before she could speak again, I ended the call. That was 10 minutes ago. Since then, I've gotten 4 more messages. 1 from her, 1 from Ryan, 2 from Tim, both unread. I keep staring at that letter Ryan gave me, the one sitting on my coffee table. I reread the opening line again, trying to decide if he meant it, or if it was just a strategic play, a kid trying to patch things up because his safety net vanished. But then I remembered the way he looked at me before he left. Not desperate, ashamed. And I keep coming back to that. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. But just as I'm about to get up, there's a knock on the door again. Not the doorbell this time. Just 2 slow knocks. And when I open it, it's not Ryan. It's Tim. And he's holding a check. You made your point, he says. But I just stare. Because the last thing I expected was him showing up. And what he says next changes everything. Tim standing on my porch was the last thing I expected. He looked uncomfortable, out of place. Like a man showing up to a chess match 3 moves too late. His usual smugness wasn't there. No tight smirk. No arrogant posture. Just a tight grip on the envelope in his hand and the unmistakable twitch of someone who's finally realized the foundation beneath him is starting to crack. You made your point, he said again, as if that alone could sweep up the mess and put everything back where it belonged. I leaned against the doorway. Did I? He cleared his throat. Look, I know we haven't exactly seen eye to eye, but this thing with Ryan, it's getting out of hand. I raised my eyebrow. Did it get out of hand before or after you let him stand in your yard and say I was never his father? He hesitated. It was just a joke. I shook my head slowly. No, it was the truth dressed up as a punchline. And everyone laughed because that truth made you feel like a bigger man. Tim shifted his weight from one foot to the other. I didn't ask him to say it. I didn't know he would. But you didn't stop him either, I said. You stood there and smiled like a man accepting an award you didn't earn. He went quiet. The tension hung between us like thick humidity. Finally, he held out the envelope. It's a check. $5,000. I know it doesn't cover everything, but it's something toward the tuition. I figured maybe it'd help. I didn't take it. Is that what this is? You're trying to buy my silence now. No, he said quickly. I'm trying to fix things. I didn't come here to fight. I came here because Ryan's falling apart. He's not sleeping. He's barely talking. He thinks you hate him. I crossed my arms. I don't hate him. I'm disappointed. There's a difference. He knows that now, Tim said. He knows he messed up. But he's still a kid, Mark. You and I both know what 19-year-old boys are like. Cocky, stupid, and half aware of how much they actually don't know. That made me pause. Because deep down, I knew he wasn't wrong. Tim looked me in the eye. You've been a better father to him than I ever could be. I may have played the part, but you were the one keeping everything afloat behind the curtain. I see that now. Ryan sees it too. I finally took the envelope, but I didn't open it. You really believe that? I asked. He nodded. I do. I stepped aside and let him in. Not because I forgave him, but because sometimes the bigger move is letting the other side squirm a little in your own house. Tim sat awkwardly on the far edge of the couch, the same spot Ryan had sat in hours before. I took my time making coffee, poured him a mug, slid it across the table. It sat untouched. I never wanted to take your place, he said. I just filled a gap when I thought it needed to be filled. But I didn't realize how much damage that did. You didn't just fill a gap, I said. You helped create it. He winced. Fair. I looked down at the check. Opened the envelope. $5,000, signed. Real money. Not a symbolic gesture. Still, I folded it back up. Keep it. He blinked. What? You're not paying your way out of this, I said. If Ryan wants to make this right, it has to come from him. Not you. Tim nodded slowly. All right. I walked him to the door, and as he stepped outside, he paused. For what it's worth, he said, I always admired how you handled things. You could have made this whole situation a mess years ago, but you didn't. I didn't reply. He left. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't being erased anymore. The next morning, I got a text from Ryan. It was just one sentence. Can I come over after class? I want to talk. No excuses. Just the truth. I replied, doors open. He showed up around 5. No hoodie this time. Just jeans and a plain shirt, backpack slung over his shoulder, and a serious look in his eyes. We sat across from each other again, this time with less silence. I'm not here to ask you to pay again, he said immediately. I'm here because I need to make things right. Go on, I said. I went to the financial aid office today, he continued. They gave me forms to reapply. I'm going to try and get coverage through work study and loans. I know it won't be easy, but I want to earn it now. I don't want to hide behind you anymore. I studied him. There was no performance in his voice. No kid trying to game the system. Just a young man finally owning the weight of his mistakes. And if you can't get the funding in time? I asked. I'll defer a semester, he said. Get a job, work, save, and come back stronger. I'd rather do that than keep taking things for granted. I sat back. I never needed you to pay me back, Ryan. I just needed to know I wasn't disposable. I know, he said, voice cracking a little. And I'm sorry I made you feel that way. No one else has ever shown up for me the way you have. I just didn't see it. But I do now. And I won't forget it again. This time, when he hugged me, I hugged him back. Not out of obligation. Not out of guilt. But because that hug didn't feel like it was coming from a kid who wanted something. It came from a son who finally understood who his father really was. A month later, Ryan secured enough aid to stay enrolled. It wasn't easy, and he had to work weekends at a hardware store near campus, but he handled it. I offered to help again, he declined. Not out of pride, but because he wanted to earn the rest of his path. He still comes over on Sundays now. No Rolexes, no gifts, no big announcements. Just coffee, conversation, and laughter. Last week, he brought a photo album he made from when he was a kid. Old pictures I hadn't seen in years. On the cover, he'd written, "For the only dad who ever showed up." I didn't need a holiday or an award. I just needed that. And this Father's Day, he didn't buy me a watch. He bought me breakfast and said, "Thanks for being the reason I got this far." That was enough. Finally, my name is Alex. I'm 29, and I've always been the quiet achiever in the family. Not the favorite, not the rebel, not the golden child, just the dependable one. The one who shows up, pays on time, stays late to help clean after family parties, and doesn't make a scene when someone accidentally forgets his birthday. I'm not bitter. At least I wasn't. Not until the cruise. Every year, my extended family plans this big annual vacation together. They rotate between ski lodges, beach resorts, cruises, sometimes even Europe. It's always the same crew, my aunts, uncles, cousins, and whoever they're dating that year. Ever since I turned 24 and started earning decent money, I've quietly picked up part of the tab each time. Not the whole bill, just enough to cover one or two people so no one had to cancel. They never really asked, but they always assumed I'd help. Alex has it. Alex can swing it. It was never discussed openly, just whispered like it was part of my role. Reliable, generous, quiet. This year was different. I'd just wrapped up a grueling quarter at work. I'd barely taken any days off in months, pulling double shifts and weekend projects so I could hit a deadline. My bonus was finally about to land, and it was a big one. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd be able to join the cruise this year without worrying about work calls and emergency logins. I even mentioned it to my cousin Zoe during a coffee meetup. She smiled and said, "You should totally come. It's going to be a blast. Mexico, Aruba, St. Thomas. Everyone's going. Except me." 2 weeks later, I saw the group chat explode with photos of tickets, cabin assignments, and cruise countdown memes. My name wasn't anywhere. No invite. No message. Not even a "Hey, are you coming this year?" I waited a day, then another. Finally, I texted my Aunt Lisa, who usually organizes the trip. "Hey, just checking, did I miss something? Was there a separate invite or email for the cruise?" She replied an hour later, "Hey, sweetie, we figured you'd be super busy with work again this year. Didn't want to pressure you." Smiling face with smiling eyes. That smiley face made my stomach drop. I didn't respond. I just stared at the message for a while, letting it sink in. They didn't forget. They decided. On my behalf. And somehow that felt worse. Like I was a minor character in my own family. The next day, I was scrolling through my bank notifications during lunch when I noticed a charge. $18,462. Ocean Glide Cruises. My jaw tightened. I tapped for more details, heart thudding in my chest. The charge came from my personal card. Not the shared family trip card I'd reluctantly agreed to set up years ago, but my main one. The one I used for groceries and rent. I called the cruise line immediately. "Hi, I just noticed a charge from you guys on my personal card. It wasn't authorized." The customer service rep paused. "Let me pull it up." "Yes, it looks like you're listed as the primary on a group booking for 12 passengers, all under the last name family party." 12. That was all of them. Everyone. Including my younger cousins who still lived at home and had no income. Including my sister and her new boyfriend. Even my dad's weird golfing buddy, apparently. All booked under my card. Something inside me cracked, but it wasn't anger. It was something colder. Quieter. Precise. Like when you realize someone didn't just forget you. They used you. Assumed you'd be too passive to notice, too polite to object. I took a breath. "Can I cancel the entire booking? You want to cancel the full package?" "Yes. And I'd like the full refund returned to the original card, please." There was a pause. The cruise is set to depart tomorrow morning. I'm aware. Another pause. As long as you're the primary cardholder and request cancellation at least 24 hours in advance, we can issue a full refund. It may take 3 to 5 business days to reflect. I exhaled slowly. Perfect. Please proceed. That evening, I didn't say anything. I didn't post. I didn't text. I let it simmer. The next morning, while I sipped coffee in my apartment and logged into my now partially refunded bank account, the group chat lit up like wildfire. Photos from the port. Selfies with sunglasses. One of them even posted a picture of the ship behind them. Ocean glide, here we come. Tropical drink, water wave, sun. I didn't reply. Around 10:40 a.m., I got the first call. Uncle Greg. I let it go to voicemail. Then Aunt Lisa. Then my sister. Then Zoe. Then a number I didn't recognize. Probably someone at the cruise terminal. Finally, I picked up when my dad called. Alex, what did you do? I took a long sip of my coffee. Morning, Dad. They're saying the cruise is canceled. The whole thing's off. People are crying. They can't rebook. It's peak season. That's unfortunate, I said flatly. Thought you'd be too busy with the ocean anyway. You canceled it. I didn't know I was even invited. Funny how that works. You could have just told us. Like how you told me about the trip? He was silent. I let it sit for a beat. They used my card without asking. I added. I didn't authorize that. I just did what any responsible cardholder would do. He mumbled something about overreacting, then hung up. But that wasn't even the real revenge. That was just the opening act. I had receipts. Literally. Years of them. Every charge I'd paid. Every deposit I'd covered. Every emergency hotel I'd booked when someone forgot theirs. All of it. Quietly filed and stored. I pulled up the folder and got to work. Because if they thought I'd just cancel the cruise and walk away, they hadn't seen Step 2 yet. Step 2 started with an old email. One I hadn't thought about in a while, from a tax consultant friend I'd met at a tech networking event 2 years ago. His name was Rami, and back then he'd casually mentioned, if you ever have family mixing finances, keep your documentation. People forget who pays for what real quick. I never planned to need that advice, but I'd followed it anyway. Over the next few days, while the family stewed in tropical disappointment back home, luggage returned, photos deleted, and vacation dreams snapped in half, I spent my nights quietly organizing. Screenshots, PDF receipts, hotel confirmations, Uber records, even Venmo transactions with vague notes like, thanks, or got you next time folded hands that never actually turned into repayments. The amount was stunning. Over the past 6 years, I'd spent just under $46,000 on family-related expenses. That's not counting birthdays or Christmas gifts. Just the things I never got credit for. Trips, plane tickets, deposits, emergency contributions when a cousin's card randomly declined. I told myself I was being kind. That one day, they'd remember. They didn't. So I compiled a document, 16 pages long, titled it, Reimbursements and Unauthorized Charges, Breakdown. I highlighted every single item, color-coded, included dates, payment method, who benefited, who promised to pay back. I didn't send it yet. I wanted the timing to hurt. That came the following Sunday. Family dinner, a weekly tradition that I used to attend back when it felt like I had a place at the table. This time, I didn't go. Instead, I emailed the document at exactly 6:05 p.m., the moment I knew they'd just sat down, plates full, chatter starting to rise. Subject, since we're talking about fairness. The replies hit like clockwork. First it was confusion, then defensiveness. Aunt Lisa replied, "This feels a bit aggressive, don't you think?" My cousin Jordan chimed in with, "Dude, it's family. Who keeps receipts like this?" I didn't respond. I let them talk to themselves. Until the group chat, which had finally gone quiet since the cruise fiasco, started buzzing again. Someone had made a new group, called Family Core. I wasn't added, but they made one mistake. They didn't remove my email from the vacation booking platform. So when I got the auto reminder about the next family trip they were planning, a mountain lodge this time, I logged in and saw that they'd once again accidentally selected my card as the default. They never learn. I updated the payment details, removing my card, and instead added a new one. A prepaid burner card I'd loaded with exactly 1 cent. Just enough to pass validation, but not enough to reserve a paper napkin, let alone a 10-person ski lodge. Then I sat back. 3 days later, I got a call from the lodge manager. "Hi, Mr. Ramirez. We're following up on the declined deposit for your group booking. It seems there was an issue with the payment method. We've held the rooms, but we'll need an alternate card within 24 hours or we'll have to cancel the reservation. I smiled. Oh, no worries at all. Cancel it. They won't be needing the rooms. Click. Later that night, I finally got a text from my sister. She'd been quiet through the whole thing. Never asked about the cruise. Never reached out about the email. Just sent me a single message. I get it now. I really do. I'm sorry. It hit different. She wasn't even the worst one. She'd just been complicit in silence, like most of them. But that message stuck with me longer than the yelling and the guilt trips that followed. Because step 3, that wasn't revenge. That was redefinition. I changed the login info on the family travel account. I called the bank and requested a new card, disabling all linked services. I shut down the shared family Google Drive where I'd stored itineraries, emergency contacts, and travel insurance copies over the years. And then I did the pettiest thing I've ever done in my life. I created a new group chat, titled it Ocean View 2025, and I added only 2 people, my best friend Noah and my sister. I posted one thing, a screenshot of a confirmed booking, an even bigger cruise next year, private suite, balcony, butler service, spa credit, already paid in full. Then I sent a message beneath it, booked with my real crew this time. And just before I archived the chat, I saw the 3 little dots. My sister was typing, but I didn't stay to read it. Because step 4, that's where things really start to shift, and they have no idea what's coming next. Step 4 wasn't just about money. That part was already handled. The refunds had processed. The shared accounts were frozen. I'd updated every payment method linked to my name and made sure not a single automatic transaction from my bank touched theirs again. But I wasn't done. Because this wasn't just about a canceled cruise or a hijacked credit card. This was years of being overlooked, underappreciated, used like a backup plan, and then quietly erased when I wasn't convenient. What I wanted now was clarity. Not for me, for them. So I started with Zoe. She and I had been close once, back when we were kids, running barefoot through my grandparents' yard, climbing trees, racing bikes, sharing secrets. But somewhere along the way, she became one of them. One of the voices that joked about me being too busy or too serious. The ones who rolled their eyes when I stayed home to finish work. She was the one I told about my plans to join this cruise. The one who said I should totally come. And she still didn't say a word when they left me off the invite list. I invited her to coffee. She showed up late, sunglasses on, no apology. So this about the cruise drama? I didn't even flinch. Zoe, just answer one thing honestly. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Shoot, did you know they were putting it on my card again? Her mouth opened, closed. Then she scoffed. Come on, Alex. They always put it on your card first. You know how this works. You cover it. We settle it later. It's not like they meant harm. They didn't settle anything, Zoe. They just assumed. Again. She looked away, fiddling with her spoon. Maybe they thought you wouldn't notice. And there it was. Not malice. Just indifference. The kind that cuts deeper than any insult. I nodded slowly. Thanks for your honesty. We didn't talk much after that. I paid the bill, of course, and left her with a quiet take care. That was the last time we spoke. But talking to Zoe gave me a better idea of the family's mindset. They didn't see it as betrayal. They saw it as convenience. And people like that don't change until their convenience disappears. So step 4 took shape. I started reaching out to other family members. Not to confront them. No yelling, no finger pointing. I was polite, calm, almost surgical. I'd message things like, hey, just noticed you were still listed on my Netflix account. I'll be removing everyone by the end of the week, so please make your own if you still need access. Or hi, just got notified my Disney Plus family plan has maxed out users, realized it's all cousins. I'm switching to a solo account. One by one, I began reclaiming every little corner of my life that they had quietly taken space in. Subscriptions, streaming, my old Amazon Prime family group, where I'd footed every delivery fee for 5 years. Gone. The Costco card I shared with Aunt Lisa. Deactivated. Every time I removed something, I got messages. Some confused, some angry, some just awkward. Aunt Lisa wrote, "You're really doing all this over a vacation? Isn't this petty?" I replied, "I'm doing this because you've treated me like a utility, and I'm tired of being plugged in only when it's convenient." She left it on read. Then came the tipping point. My uncle, The same one who screamed at me after the cruise got canceled, called me in the middle of a workday. I usually let those go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Alex," he said, voice tight. "You went too far." I leaned back in my chair. "Really? Which part?" "You embarrassed us. You humiliated this family. Everyone's talking about how you blew up over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that cost me $18,000. He didn't answer. I continued. "You know what the real embarrassment is? A grown man relying on his nephew's credit card to fund his vacations and then acting shocked when the free ride ends. That's not fair." "No, Uncle Bill. What's not fair is how many times I paid without a word. You all got used to it. But that ends now." He paused. "So that's it. You're cutting us all off." I thought for a moment. "Not cutting off. I'm just rebalancing the scales. You were happy when I was invisible. Now you get to feel what that's like." He hung up. No goodbye, just silence. And maybe that was the real shift. Not in them, in me. Because the longer this dragged on, the more I saw it clearly. I was never really part of the family in the way I thought. I was a service. A button they could press when something went wrong. A wallet they could tap when funds ran low. Not a person. Not someone they celebrated. Just someone they used. But now they didn't have that anymore. They were scrambling, trying to figure out new payment methods, new group leaders, new logistics. And for the first time in years, I felt weightless. Then, just as I started to settle into the quiet, I got a phone call I didn't expect. From my grandfather. He never called. Not even on birthdays. We weren't close. He'd always been a little gruff, a little distant. But he called me, out of the blue. When I answered, he said, "Alex, you got time for lunch tomorrow?" I paused. "Sure." He didn't explain, didn't say why, but something in his voice told me this wasn't just a casual meal. It was something more. And that's when I realized, whatever this was building toward, it wasn't over. Not even close. Lunch with my grandfather wasn't at a diner or a casual chain restaurant. He picked a quiet little Italian spot tucked behind an office building on the edge of town. A place with white tablecloths and waiters who called you sir, even if you showed up in jeans. He was already there when I arrived. Sitting at a corner table, back straight, hands folded, staring out the window like a man waiting for news. I hadn't seen him in almost a year. He looked older, but not weaker. Just more still. "Alex," he said, nodding once. "Sit." I did. We ordered quickly. He got the same thing he always used to, penne arrabbiata with extra chili. I got a salad I wasn't hungry for. And then he went quiet again, until the bread arrived. "You know," he started, tearing off a piece of crust. "When I was your age, I worked 2 jobs and had 3 brothers who all acted like they were the ones doing me a favor every time I bailed them out." I blinked. "I didn't know that." "Of course not," he said. "Because I never said anything. Just like you." He looked at me then, not with judgment, but with a kind of reluctant admiration. "Your father's side of the family has a talent for pretending the hand that feeds them is just a lucky coincidence. They've been doing it for years. With me. With your father. With you." I didn't know what to say. I didn't expect support. Certainly not from him. "I saw the cruise fall out," he went on. "They've been scrambling like headless chickens ever since. Fighting over who should have checked the payments. Arguing over whether you overreacted. Lisa called me crying. Said you humiliated them." I raised an eyebrow. "And what did you say?" I told her if she was so humiliated, maybe she should learn how to pay for her own vacations. He took a bite of bread, chewed it slowly. She hung up on me. I actually laughed. Not a loud laugh, but the kind that you don't realize has been stuck in your chest for years. "I didn't bring you here to pick sides," he said. "I brought you here to tell you that you're not crazy. You didn't imagine this. They used you, and they're mad you stopped letting them." That hit harder than I expected. Because even after all of it, the receipts, the canceled bookings, the sudden flood of guilt, a small part of me still wondered if I'd gone too far. If I'd become the villain in my own family. But hearing that from him, it grounded me. He leaned in. "You're not just a wallet, Alex. And if they can't treat you like family, you're better off without them." We talked for a while after that. About old stories I'd never heard. About how he used to hide his overtime checks from my grandmother just so he could help his brother with hospital bills. About the resentment. The quiet anger. The years it took him to finally say, "No more." It was like hearing the backstory of a life I didn't know I was repeating. Before we left, he pulled out a folded envelope and slid it across the table. "This is for you. Not because you need it. I know you're fine. but because no one else in this family will ever say thank you the way you deserve. I opened it when I got home. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a note for the cruises, for the birthdays, for everything they forgot. Spend it on something that doesn't forget you. I didn't cash it right away. I just sat with it. Let it be real. The following week, I booked a solo trip. Not a cruise. Something quieter, a cabin in Alaska overlooking the mountains, just as the northern lights started showing up for the season. I turned off my phone, brought books, and stayed off the grid. It was the first vacation I'd taken in years that didn't involve coordinating for 10 people, covering 3, and being forgotten by all. When I got back, the family had finally stopped calling. Mostly. A few tried to reach out. Half-hearted apologies, guilt-laced texts, invitations to brunch that felt more like tests. I didn't respond to most. Except for Zoe. Her message came late one night. I found a spreadsheet in my email from years ago. You paid for that Thailand trip. I didn't know. I'm sorry I joked about you being a buzzkill. I was being cruel. You didn't deserve that. I typed. Erased. Typed again. Finally replied. Thanks. I just wanted to feel like I mattered. Like I was part of it all. She replied a few minutes later. You always were. We were just too selfish to see it. It didn't fix things, but it was something. A crack in the wall. I didn't rejoin the family group chat. Didn't attend the next birthday party. I sent a card and a gift. Nothing expensive, just thoughtful. And that's what I kept doing. No more blank checks. No more emergency lifelines. Just boundaries, built clean and solid. The craziest part? Life got quieter. Simpler. I had more time. More space. I started reading more. Cooking. I even picked up piano again, something I gave up when I was 18 and got pulled into the whirlwind of being everyone's backup. 6 months later, I got a wedding invite from my cousin Rachel. I almost didn't go, but then I saw the name at the bottom. Reception hosted by the couple. That had never happened before. I went. Sat near the middle. No kids' table. No guilt. No passive-aggressive jokes. When the best man gave his toast, he thanked everyone who supported them emotionally and financially. He looked directly at me and smiled. And for once, I smiled back. Not because I needed recognition, but because I'd finally learned the difference between being part of a family and being used by one. And I would never, ever forget it again.